Muy buenos días a todos.
Good morning to all of you. I'm Colonel Daniel Carlos Silva of the Army of Brazil, head of the section of humanitarian demining of the IADB, and coordinator of this seminar on humanitarian demining. It's an honor to welcome to this important encounter in which we will reaffirm our commitment with the total eradication of anti-personal mines in our hemisphere. Humanitarian demining is not only a technical task, it is an act of humanity that returns security, dignity, and opportunities to the communities affected during decades. This seminar is a space of cooperation and exchange of knowledge that seeks to contribute to the security, peace, and the well-being of our communities. I invite you to take advantage of this moment to strengthen our common will to work together for an America free of anti-personal mines. And to continue with our agenda, I have the pleasure of introducing Commander Paola Merino of the Air Force of Peru, who is going to be the moderator of this event. Commander Merino, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Colonel, for your presentation. I'm Commander of the Air Force of Peru, Paola Merino, and it is an honor for me to moderate this seminar of humanitarian demining, whose core issue is the story of the use of anti-personal mines in the hemisphere, a topic of great relevance for our hemispheric security and the welfare of our communities. We start at this moment, and it will be developed virtually up to 1:30 Washington hour. We will have simultaneous translation in Spanish, English, and Portuguese. Throughout the morning, we have 7 speeches, each one for about 30 minutes each. Among the third and fourth, we will have a brief break of 10 minutes. Due to the limitations of time, we will not be able to transmit all the questions live for the participants, but all participants can send their questions through the chat of the transmission channels. These will be compiled and sent to the conference, to the speakers who will respond through the email later on. So now we will start with our agenda. I have the honor of inviting the person who will give the remarks of this event, General Reinaldo Salgado, Secretary of the IADB. Major General Salgado has the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. With great satisfaction, we start this seminar, the story of the demining. And I welcome you to this seminar of the IADB. This is very important for the protection of the populations of our continent because it deals with one of the most difficult legacies in our hemisphere, in our region. In the past, we have seen constant efforts to support our member states against this threat. The Armamica, the mission of assistance for the removal of mines for Central America, has removed all the mines, and we also have one for South America, and the adoption of the good practices for demining, humanitarian demining, that is now our job. And this work gives us an opportunity to continue with this trajectory. We're going to learn today about this program, the ICMA, and the background and the results of Marmica, and also of the program for anti-mining in Chile, Peru, and Colombia. And we also will learn about the technical capacity of the CMI groups and the GATI, all part of the IADB that is going to be spoken about by the Colombia. Our speakers have a great experience and a great professional track against demining and the protection against mines. And I'm sure that with their presentations, you will receive very important information. I thank very especially Eva Marquez, who will give us the welcoming words. The history that we will see today is not only a record of the past, but also a reminder that the anti-personal mines in this hemisphere still need an continuous effort and a political commitment of all of us. Welcome to all of you, and I hope that this seminar is going to be a space for reflection and an exchange of experiences and the strengthening of our collective capacities. Thank you very much. I will give the floor now to Ivan Marquez. I would like to start by saluting the General Secretariat and also Major General Cesar Augusto Macedo Garcia, President of the Council of Delegates of the IADB, and the authorities and officers, colleagues and friends that are here and online. Good morning to all of you. On behalf of the Secretariat of Multidimensional Secretariat of the OAS, it is a pleasure to say hello this morning and to participate to you this opening ceremony of the Humanitarian demining seminar of the IADB. As you know, this started from the profound conviction to protect human lives and restitute the dignity of the communities that during many years have lived in between the fear and uncertainty of the personal minds. This effort looks not only to eliminate a threat, a silence threat, but also to return the trust, security, and the use of land to those that need it the most. At the end of last century, particularly during the decade of the 80s and 90s, the world faced a humanitarian crisis of a grand scale as the contamination by these mines. Our region, the Americas, was not distant from this. In 1991, several member states of the OAS, especially in Central America, spoke about this threat, giving origin to a regional program that even today continues saving lives and transforming the territories. This was the beginning of the program of the holistic action against personal mines that is called as AICMA, established by the General Assembly of the OAS in the year 1992, with the purpose of converting the Americas into a zone free of anti-personal landmines, and through the cooperation and the technical assistance to the member states of the OAS. We have done this job since then. Then, after 23 years of existence of this program, our region has demonstrated with facts that international cooperation, technical assistance, and the political commitment that is sustained can make the difference. We are proud for having declared Central America as a zone free of anti-personal mines, an achievement of the countries that was achieved in 2010 with the assistance of AICMA, that has positioned the Americas as a global referent in the initiatives of the humanitarian demining and other issues. Today, the Secretariat of Multidimensional Security of the OAS, through the section of conventional weapons, and continues accompanying all the member states in their walk to zone free of mines. The advancements are very fruitful. Ecuador is about to finish its commitment to clean its territory from mines, and Peru has the target of doing it in the next 5 years. And Colombia has presented a very ambitious plan for 2030. All these efforts are a reflection of the collective commitment to eradicate definitely this threat from our hemisphere. In Colombia, the AICMA program supports all the complete scope of demining, education on the risk of mines, physical and psychological rehabilitation of the persons that suffered this, and their economic reintegration, destruction of the mines that are stored, and also see to the transfer of these personal mines. The objective of AICMA is to reestablish the conditions of productive and safe lives for the communities affected by the mines. We recognize the IADB especially, and the group of Inter-American monitors that have been our partners in Central America and continue playing a fundamental role in supporting the actions of AICMA in Colombia. Through the Inter-American monitors, the IADB renders technical assistance to AICMA Korea that is translated in actions and the evaluation of documents and operations of organizations of humanitarian demining, that AICMA OAS is responsible for the monitoring and the external quality of its operations. Ladies and gentlemen, seminars like these give us the opportunity to see back with humility, recognizing the achievements and also challenges and lessons learned in more than 2 decades of sustainable work. but also invites us to look forward to a future in which new threats like the explosive devices and the autonomous lethal weapons and other emerging technologies demand us to adapt our responses and to double our efforts. And the accrued knowledge and the strategic alliances of IICMA and the OAS itself allows us to continue supporting the member states of the OAS in a coordinated manner together with the IADB to face these new threats, ensuring that the regional response to these emerging threats be opportune, effective, and sustainable. With the experience acquired during a quarter of a century, we reaffirm our commitment with a region that is more safe, stable, and truly free of anti-personal mines. This is a task that has not finished, but not impossible. And together, as a region, we're closer than ever to reach it. Let's continue working with determination, innovation, and unity, because each step that we take towards a continent free of threats is a step towards a lasting peace of our communities that they deserve. Thanks to the IADB for sponsoring this encounter and to all of you that accompany us online and in this room. I wish you an excellent seminar to all, and thank you very much. We thank the opening remarks of Mr. Ivan Marquez, Secretary of Multidimensional Security of the OAS, whose intervention reinforces the efforts of elimination of anti-personal mines and the security of our communities. Our first speaker is dedicated to analyze the evolution of the support programs to demining, particularly the PATCA, the Program of Assistance for the Demining of Central America, and ICMAN, which is Integral Action Against Personal Mines. Our speaker is Lina Castillo, manager of the program of ICMA of the OAS. An industrial engineer with international certifications in management of humanitarian demining. She has ample experience in the coordination of projects, the establishment of standards, and the direction of operations in the international arena. She has contributed to the strengthening of the capacities of all member states and important advancements towards a hemisphere free of anti-personal mines. With pleasure, I give the floor to Lina Castillo so that she can share with us her experience and knowledge on the programs supporting humanitarian demining. Good morning to all of you, and thank you for this opportunity. General Salgado, Secretary Marquez, and General Macedo, colleagues and friends, and all those that are online that we cannot see, my best regards. I want to start with this presentation talking about mines, because as Secretary Marquez mentioned some minutes ago, the reason of being of these programs is to ensure that we're protecting the human lives. And in the region, in the Americas, we have reached almost 19,000 victims. And this number continues growing. And as the Secretary Marquez was mentioning some minutes ago, we are very close to achieve the purpose of an America free of mines, which was the purpose with which the General Assembly started to manage resources and to create what today is the AICA program. And nevertheless, we still have a long way to go. Unfortunately, situations of armed violence and conflicts in the region continue bringing numbers to this statistic of victims, and we cannot forget the purpose for which we're doing this work. That is to ensure that these persons and the communities that are affected by the presence of these explosive devices in their territories can use their land without any fear. And we will be closer then to live in an America that is in peace and security. At the end of this talk, you will be able to understand or know a little bit more about the commitment of the member states of the OAS with having a territory free of the contamination of anti-personnel mines and explosive devices. You will be able to understand the origin of the AICMA of the OAS and know about the main achievements of our program. And we're going to talk about the current role of the OAS in Colombia with the AICMA. I want to start by telling you some data that show the commitment of the region with the decontamination and the elimination of threats that represent these anti-personnel mines. Of the 35 states that are members of the Ottawa Convention, of the 165 states of the Convention of Ottawa, 35 are of the Americas and 32 members of the OAS. That means that 19% of all the states that are members of the convention that prohibits the use and the transfer and manufacturing of anti-personnel mines, 19% of all those are states of our region, and not only of our region, but also members of the organization. As the Secretary Marquez said, we also have a great achievement, and that is that Central America was declared free of mines in 2010. And we are working so that the rest of the Americas can be declared free of mines as well, so that we can have a full region that is free of the scourge of anti-personnel mines. For this, Ecuador is about to comply with, according to the information that Ecuador has presented to the convention at the end of this year, the country will be declared as free of mines. Peru is doing all the efforts possible so that in 3 to 5 years they can be compliant, and Colombia has just requested an extension with a full program that we hope will advance not only in the decontamination of the territories in which they were prioritized at the beginning because they had conditions of easy access, but also be able to access those areas that have certain factors of unstable security, but that can favor the appropriation of those territories by the communities affected by the mines. In the region, we have 7 countries to date that have been declared free of mines. Of those, at least 5 have been supported by the OAS. Of the 13 countries in the region that reported the storage of anti-personnel mines to the convention, 12 are members of the OAS, and all of them have already complied with the commitment of destroying those mines. In total, in the region, 2,720,316 mines were destroyed, and the ICMA OAS supported at least the destruction of at least 2 million of those. It is very important to highlight that in face of the convention, we are a region that has complied not only with the obligations to destroy the arsenals or mines that stored mines, but also with the exercise of elimination of the threats in the areas that are identified as mined, not only because we make the efforts, but because we're constantly reporting both for Article 7 and Article 5 of the Convention, and we are transparent in the way in which we have done our work. And this is an effort of a cooperation and collaboration among all the states in the region. The origin of the program. The General Assembly of the OAS, through the Resolution 1191, established a special fund to support the efforts of humanitarian demining in the region that arose from the need of the countries of Central America in 91, where they requested the OAS to support the efforts of decontamination that are referred in their territories. ICMA-OAS supports a series of components in the action against mines. Among we can include humanitarian demining. And although the implementation of these operations is not part of the actions that we are doing, what we have been able to compile from the experience that we had in Central America is a technical capacity that will allow us to ensure that the way in which we do the demining in Colombia, for instance, is the appropriate one because it's safe and efficient. We work in education in the risk of mines, and not only in education in the risk of mines, but also in the risk of explosive devices, because the reality is that when we are on the terrain and we find ourselves with an explosive device or a war device, we cannot make the difference between a mine or any other type of device. And so what we do is to prevent, so that nobody that is in an area in which there is a contamination with explosive devices suffer an accident with one of these. The differentiation of working only with education and the risk of mines and education of explosive devices is to ensure ourselves that we understand the contamination in each one of the territories and that we adapt the messages to be able to protect or at least promote safe behaviors in these communities. Physical and psychological rehabilitation of victims of mines and their economic and social reintegration has been of great importance, especially in programs like the one in Nicaragua and now in Colombia. Social integration and economic integration of victims is part of this job or task that seem evident, but then after the victims are taken care of in the first needs of health, we forget that their needs to be able to adapt to a normal life once again goes beyond just receiving a prosthetic or medical attention. The work of ICMA-OAS in the last years, and especially the one in Colombia, is very concentrated in giving these people the possibility of having a life in which socially and economically they can feel integrated and valuable. The destruction of storage mines is a commitment that, as I explained, all the countries of the region, including the 12 member states that reported storage of anti-personnel mines, complied with. We complied with this in 2007, but by this commitment and this experience arose the program of weapons through the management of those arsenals and the destruction of the arsenals that were stored. The program that today is known as PACAM at the OAS was born and is being strengthened through the experience. The reason why the program of the action against mines at the OAS is so important is because it's been the way in which we have included issues of disarmament, not only the control of proliferation, but also of the effects and the actions that we can make once these weapons or these ammunitions or these explosives are out. We try to prevent, but also to take mitigation measures once these risks are exposed to potential destruction, or that they are in places where the communities are not affected. And finally, the promotion of the prohibition of the use, storage, production, and transfer of anti-personnel mines. And on this action, we also see that the evolution of the program EICMAN and now the conventional weapons and explosive devices learns from what we have been doing in the last 25 years. And what we can see is that when we support all the exercise of prohibition and the promotion of legal measures at the level of the states for mines, we have learned and we have replicated with other types of conventional weapons and conventions, and we will have to replicate this once again with threats like the autonomous weapons, lethal weapons, and other types of emerging technologies that will have to be regulated eventually to ensure human lives. Since we started to work in the action against mines in the hemisphere, 10 countries of the region have been benefited. I don't know if you can see the countries, but we have supported Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Peru, and Suriname. And all have been supported in a differentiated way because the needs in each country are different. Some have needed to have an accompaniment in their efforts for the decontamination of the territory to declare their territories free of mines. Others have needed accompaniment in the destruction of the arsenals, like the case of Costa Rica, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Suriname, and others have needed other has needed accompaniment in the destruction of their arsenals, like the case of Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, Peru, Colombia. And in the case of Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Honduras, Guatemala, and Suriname, the support has been in the humanitarian demining. And then we have provided assistance to more than 2,500 survivors of these mines. And the assistance is not just directly to the victim, but to the indirect victims as well that also need care. And then more than 1 million persons of 1,500 communities affected have been trained in the behavior anti-mine favor. So these people have received messages of self-protection. I don't want to stop mentioning Central America as free of mines. I think it is a milestone and that it has been a great achievement and of the OAS, because what we were able to show is that through cooperation and joint work, we can achieve the territories that were highly contaminated in the past can be territories free of mines once again. Let's talk about the action against mines in Colombia and the program. In 2001, Colombia made a request for cooperation to the OAS. Colombia had supported the programs of EICMA in Central America, and there was an experience that is personal that through the IADB and the Inter-American monitors, Colombia that had been deployed in Central America had brought. And from that experience, Colombia said, well, we that are adhering to the convention right now and that need to do this demining exercise, we are going to request assistance to the OAS because this has shown to be very efficient. And so we had the first legal framework and that established to ensure that the OAS is going to give technical assistance to the country and is going to help or support in the destruction of the arsenals and is going to accompany at the beginning the demining of 35 military bases.
After, in 2007, there was the need to
2017, they start
demining
seeing
beyond
the
the
need
military
to
bases
demine more than
because
the bases,
there was
because
an
there is an increase in
the
the number of
civil
civilian
victims in communities affected.
communities affected. So then, ICMA
Therefore,
OAS
the
accompanies the
ICMA
state of
OAS
Colombia and
accompanies
the
the Colombian
battalion
states
of
and the
the
battalion of
humanitarian demining
with the first efforts of demining in the communities affected. And we left the framework of the exercise of the military bases exclusively. In 2009, Colombia, in the meeting that the states have as the Ottawa Convention, requests a review of the agreement to the OAS, because there's an initiative that so that civil organizations come and support the demining process in the country, but this requires an ensurement and quality control over the demining operations so that it is a guarantee for the Colombian states and for the communities affected that the territory that has been taken care of with methodologies of humanitarian demining or earth liberation techniques is safe so that the communities can go back and take advantage of that land. So this new agreement is signed, and this new agreement makes the organization and the program have to develop a capability in the monitoring external component. The external component of monitoring is the guarantee of the quality in the action against the mines. It has been based historically in two exercises: accreditation and monitoring of the organizations of humanitarian demining. The accrediting and monitoring go hand in hand. Normally, there are two exercises that make part of a big quality control management program. And it allows to establish that the work that is being carried out is being done correctly, is safe, is effective, is efficient, and so that the communities can come back and use their land fully. But also, the Colombian state can transfer again to the communities these lands without fear of an accident or a permanent risk. Let's talk about accrediting. So this is about making sure about that the people who are doing the work have the tools to do it, and that the personnel is properly trained. This means that they have the skills to do the work. So there's two phases that is being supported by this program. The first is the documentary evaluation, and in this evaluation, we make sure that the operational processes that are being used by the organizations of demining in the country are appropriate. They comply with the requirements of the national norms, and they are safe and efficient. The origin of the humanitarian demining begins in 1980 in Afghanistan, when, due to the need, a lot of civilians start to do demining. But what happens then is that a lot of accidents occur because they were trying to eliminate the explosive risk, and what they were doing, they were losing a lot of lives of the people who were doing the work. So then a series of requirements are being created and norms to make sure that the work is being done in an adequate manner and that no more lives are going to be lost when this work is being done. The accrediting and The accreditation and this process is about this. It is about making sure that the processes that are going to be used are safe. Then we have the operational evaluation, and what we do is to make sure that each of the persons who are being trained to do the work knows how to do it, and they are implementing their processes in an adequate manner. So we accompany the training processes. We make sure that the plans for training that the organizations are going to use are going to generate the capabilities that are being required. And at the same time, we make sure that the people who are being trained effectively are going to do things as the organization tells them to do. Then we have an organization with procedures that are appropriate based on national standards, personnel that is trained and skilled to do the work, and then the exercise of humanitarian demining and liberation of land begins. And this work of monitoring begins. It begins since the first phase, since the planning of the deployment, since the planning of the operations, because it is important to understand that the techniques that are going to be used, if they are adequate for the places where they're going to be deployed. So we pay attention to the intervention plans, but then when the intervention happens, we're also paying attention to the conclusions that are being that result from the technical studies. So all the efforts are done to gather all the necessary information and the evidences to decide if a land is contaminated or not with explosives. We have enough information to define the limits of those areas. Once those areas have been defined, we make sure that the procedures that are being implemented are adequate, are the operational procedures that were approved, and we make sure that they are what they're supposed to be, and the personnel is doing it in a proper way as it was evaluated. When the exercise of clearance of the contaminated areas is finished, we do an exercise of quality control while the exercise is carried out of the cleared areas. And then in the end, we do a final inspection of the land. And we verify that effectively all of the reasonable efforts were done to eliminate any type of contamination or pollution of explosives that might be present in that area. And what is most important is that the communities understand the procedure and they are accepting the results of the work that has been done there. To be able to do this work, we need to have a component of information management that is very robust, because the monitoring is not nothing else but analyzing data and reviewing information, making sure that all of the data that is being compiled during the operation is coherent, consistent, and demonstrate capability. And so for this, there has been a development of databases and a lot of tools together with the Colombian state. And right now we are on a phase of development of new tools using systems, geographical information systems, to facilitate the compiling of data in the territory and for the analysis of this information. We have also a component of technical assistance, which has supported the development of operational procedures, which advises the national authorities, which provides assistance to the organizations that require it. And at this point, is also, it adds new value because we're in a transition process and we're going to transfer some responsibilities to the Colombian state. And so in this exercise, the technical assistance is primordial. As I was telling you now, the component of assistance to victims is not only supporting the basic needs or health recovery needs, but it's also working and has worked traditionally to be able to reincorporate people who have been victims of the anti-personal mines so that they can integrate back into society. and the component of education and community linking. And this is what sometimes we forget about this, about links in the community. And so everything that we do is for the community, so they need to participate in the process. This community in education on risk also ensures that the communities where we work are somehow on the train of the land liberation, and they are committed to guaranteeing that when we leave, they're going to protect themselves, and they're going to also accept the results of what's being done. Because if we do this whole exercise, which is expensive, it requires a lot of effort and resources, and the communities decide not to use the land, then we're not having the impact that we need. That is it for me. If you have any questions, then I'm opening it up for questions. In the name of the IADB, we appreciate especially Mrs. Lina Castillo for her valuable intervention, which provided us a clear and detailed report on the progress and challenges of the programs of demining at the OAS. Also, now we move on to the second presentation of this day, which is focused on the analysis and development of the missions of liberation of mines, and also the mission of the initiatives promoted by the IADB to back up the efforts of the member states in the topic of humanitarian demining. Our next presenter is the General of Brigade, Ronaldo Moraes Brancaleone from the Army of Brazil. He has more than 3 decades of military service and wide experience in operations of engineering and international cooperation. He has had key functions in peace missions of the UN and in demining projects in the inter-American environment. His participation in the planning, supervision, and execution of the operations of the missions Marminka and Marminas provides him with a deep knowledge of the evolution, achievements, and challenges, thereby making him a referent in this topic. I invite General Brancaleone to take the floor and offer us his perspective on the missions of Marminka and Marminas. The floor is yours. Good morning to everyone. I am the General of Brigade Brancaleone from the Brazilian Army. I'm going to do a presentation on the evolution of the humanitarian demining of Marminka and Marminas. Initially, I would like to greet the IADB for their initiative of doing this seminar on humanitarian demining, which rescues the history of demining in the American continent. I also appreciate the invitation to participate in this seminar, and I also express my satisfaction in sharing a bit about the missions of Marminka and Marminas. So first, starting with my presentation. Then, as an introduction, I would like to talk a little bit about my experience in humanitarian demining. As I said, I have participated in both missions, Marminka and Marminas. In Marminka, I arrived in 1999 in September, and I remained there until September of the year 2000. When I got to the mission, I was designated to integrate the team of international supervisors who were in Honduras. So there we had the headquarters in San Marco de Colón. It's next to the border with Nicaragua. Afterwards, I was assigned as coordinator of the supervisors that were in Costa Rica. And the headquarters of the mission was the city of Los Chiles in the border with Nicaragua. And 3 years later, I was assigned to participate in Marminas as an international monitor at that mission. It was from May 2003 to May 2004. And I was part of the pioneer team in the team who installed the mission, and our headquarters was the city of Sarmoria in the north of Peru back then. I would like to highlight that my presentation is based on the doctrine of humanitarian demining of that time. More than 20 years have passed by, and it's possible that some aspects of this doctrine have evolved. And so, as an introduction, before starting to talk about this mission, I would like to try to talk about the concept and the characteristics of humanitarian demining. So humanitarian demining consists of a group of activities from investigation of suspicious areas, the performance of technical studies to map this area, then also the removal of the mines or clearance, of the cleaning of the terrain, and also the signaling or marking of the area that has been cleansed, and also the limiting after the removal until we deliver the land that is free from mines. So all of this process the process is much more than just the removal of the mines. It has a lot of components. So the main characteristics of the humanitarian demining is the priority, which is the security. Security is prioritized other than quickness. So no accidents are being justified. We cannot have losses. It is a methodical process which looks for the total elimination of the mines and the artifacts that failed.
Naquela região onde estão se realizando
in that region where it's being taken place, where the work is being taken place, the individual teams have to prioritize safety more than the mobility of personnel. And in the case of the equipment, the much more heavy equipments don't need to have much mobility. What is most important is the protection of the operator and the digital parts of the machine. So an equipment can be adapted for example, construction equipment can be adapted for demining also. We have these documents, the international norms of actions against mines, which regulate all the procedures for humanitarian demining, and the countries can adapt these norms to their realities to have a detailed process about how the processes are going to be carried out, taking as a basis these international norms against mines, which are from the United Nations. And one of the activities that are foreseen in these norms is monitoring. Monitoring is an essential part of demining, which provides the mines national authorities the guarantee that the work was done in accordance with the norms of humanitarian demining. This is an authorized observation done by qualified personnel. In the case of international monitoring, the main activities are training, technical advising, and monitoring. In Marminka in 1999, back then, an international supervisor was assigned per each team. It was a big demand of international supervisors. But then when I was in Marminas in Peru and Ecuador, the situation evolved. The supervision of the operators was being done by military personnel of the country and the sector. So it was a national supervision. And the monitoring was done through international monitors. So this gave us much more flexibility, and it facilitated the work a lot because it diminished this demand of international monitors to accompany the work. Now, talking a bit about Marminka and Marminas, which are missions through which the IADB provided technical advising to ICMA. They provided technical advising, training, and supervision, certifying that the operations that were being executed were in accordance with the international norms, and highlighting that the members of the missions did not execute any demining activities. They were just monitoring the work, and the activities were being done by the institutions of each of the receptor countries. And which were the main activities done in those missions? The main one is the supervision of the activities of demining, verifying if they were being done in accordance with international norms. Also, we had to recognize the areas that were impacted or affected by mines and limiting the suspicious areas so that the demining work could be done, and also creation of awareness in schools and in towns to make the people aware about the risk that the mines have and what are the procedures that needed to be adopted if in case the population would identify or find a mine. Another basic aspect was the trainings and courses done by the monitoring international teams. So these trainings were frequent, and these courses for international monitors, supervisors, national supervisors, and leadership courses. So every time that new international monitors would arrive, these courses were provided. Also, recycling courses for the personnel who were working in the land. Another very important aspect is the evacuations, medical evacuations training. The monitors were cooperating with the updating of procedures that were to be adopted for medical evacuations and air evacuations. Even before the work, the verification of all the systems of medical evacuation was done. So the ambulance was evaluated, was assessed if it was in adequate conditions for providing the evacuation, if we had a team, the nurses, the material, the communications as well. In the case of air evacuation, medical evacuation, the verification of the helicopter, the weather verification, and contact with the hospital, where it was foreseen that the evacuation would take place. In the case that before the work started, all of this verification process began. And also trainings were done for medical evacuation, for the functioning of the system, as well as the verification of the times of evacuation. Also, there were activities made the certification of objectives of demining, which were concluded, the marking of the areas that had been cleared. Also, the monitors could cooperate in the preparation of national plans of demining, and also participating as observers of the destruction of the mines that were stored, and also the inventory of the mines that were destroyed and the cleared areas. Now moving on to talk specifically about Marminca, the mission of assistance for the removal of mines in Central America. As everybody knows, these were the countries that were the receptors: Nicaragua, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Guatemala. Now let's talk about some background. Nicaragua initially, the background of the mission of the mines in Nicaragua, which also impacted Honduras and Costa Rica. So in Nicaragua, the FNLS assumes the power in Nicaragua, and then afterwards there's a resistance to the new regime, which is being installed in the border of Nicaragua and Honduras, and in the border of Nicaragua and Costa Rica. It is important to highlight that the mines were used by the Sandinista army as well as the counterinsurgents.
And Nicaragua with Costa Rica, and also with inside Nicaragua and its surroundings. And these areas that were sensitive were prone to sabotage, and the protection of the local military units and all the towers as well. I also highlight that in 1998, there was occurred an event that made it very difficult to continue with the demining work, because it was Hurricane Mitch that destroyed all the heads of the bridges that were mined, and also the course of the rivers, and the areas that were considered of low risk in the past and were not mined became contaminated, and this made it difficult to demine all these areas. With regards to Guatemala, the country lived 36 years of internal conflicts that ended in December 1996. And these conflicts left great areas with mines and with explosive devices that were not destroyed, that are known as UXOs. And now, going quickly through our history of the Marminca, in 1993, the OAS and the IADB had a plan, a demining plan for Nicaragua, with an international team of Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Guatemala, Honduras, Peru, and Uruguay. These officers went through training in March 1993 in the United States, in Fort Benning, and starting in April 93, they prepared 4 platoons of the Nicaraguan army as deminers, and in May they started the demining job in Nicaragua. This plan continued until December 1993. In 1994, they created the Marjon, the demining program for Honduras, that started with trainings, and in 1994 and 1995, they had more trainings and trainings in demining, and in 1995, They started with the demining program in Honduras. In 1996, Nicaragua integrated in the Marminca, and this mission became Marminca. Even in 1996, Costa Rica integrated into Marminca and started demining works in October, and in 1998, Guatemala became part of Marminca as well. And the works started in 1998, and in 1999, due to logistical issues, Danli the seat was moved to Managua. And here are the conclusion years of Marminca in the different countries. In 2002, it ends its job in Costa Rica. In 2004, Marminca finished its works in Honduras and Guatemala, and in 2010 in Nicaragua. Now we have this chart showing how long the Marminca lasted in each one of the countries, starting in 1993 with the demining plan of the OAS IADB for Nicaragua. And then in 1995, it started in Honduras, 96 in Costa Rica, and 98 in Nicaragua. And the end of each one of the plans in each country, concluding in Nicaragua in 2010. The execution of all these works were carried out by the different institutions of the receiving countries. In Nicaragua, it was the Engineer Corps of Nicaragua. In Guatemala was a group of special teams of the Honduran forces. In Costa Rica was the National Police, and in Guatemala, 3 institutions that participated in the demining. That was the Engineer Corps of the Army that detected and also destroyed, and the Firefighters Volunteer Corps, and the unit of National Revolution of Guatemala did the sensitization tasks. This is the organizational chart of the organization. There was a chief, deputy chief, an officer, operations officer, a logistics officer, and staff that were for military that were in the seat of the mission. And with the exception of Nicaragua, each country had its own coordination. In Honduras, Guatemala, and the organization in Costa Rica. And in Nicaragua, there were 5 operation fronts, and also a team, a mine-sweeping team with heavy equipment. And each one of these operation fronts had one coordination. These were the countries that contributed with international advisors for Marminca, 10 countries in all, almost 300 specialists, international specialists that became international supervisors of Marminca. And the techniques employed were the manual demining with also with their own equipment, and the canine team and the heavy equipment team. These were the main types of mines that were found: the PMN, the PMDC, and the Ponzi 2. These are Russian mines, and the PPNI SR2, Czechoslovakian. These some particularities of the Marminca. Outside the conventional mined areas, we had the demining of the heads of the bridges around the high tension towers, and it was very diversified. There was mountains and forests and jungles that made it very difficult to carry out the task. And because the terrain was very rugged. Some lessons learned of Marminka. These missions were consolidated in several documents. The three main documents were the check table, the procedures manual, and the deminer's manual that consolidated all this accrued experience, where they had specified each one of the procedures of the international demining laws, and every time that there was a doubt, then they would look for the solution in these documents. The check table was a document that the international supervisors carried all the time with them on the terrain, and they always consulted it when there was any type of doubt. Here you had a detail of how to proceed with the demining in inclined territory or a mineralized terrain, or how to impregnate the detector, the sound detector. So it was a different procedure depending on the terrain, and this was very well specified in these documents, and everybody knew which procedure to adopt. And every time there was a new situation, they studied what would be the best procedure to be adopted, and included this experience in this table and in these documents. We also had a complementarity between the techniques and the different techniques for demining manual, the manually, or the canine, or with heavy equipment. Each one was more adequate for a specific phase of the demining process. Some techniques were better for the initial phase, and some others were better for the quality control. And the terrain and the vegetation had a great influence as well on this. And we always used two cleaning phases in each area. The second cleaning or clearance used a different technique, different from the first clearing. And then there was quality control in between. Talking a little bit about the assistance for the removal of mines in South America, the Marminas, the two receiving countries were Peru and Ecuador. I'm going to go quickly to the background. The conflict between Ecuador and Peru was in January 1995. There were 34 days of confrontation, and in the range of the Condor Range, and the mines, the fields were mined in the borders. The history of the Minas was that the conflict was in 98. And the countries signed a peace agreement, and in 1998, each one of the countries started the tasks to eliminate the landmines in their territories on their own. In 2001, the countries signed an agreement with the OAS to establish an assistance program called ICMAS, and then in April 2002, until the Marminka, the mission that was working in Central America, also supported with the technical assistance and trainings. And so the support of Marminka started in 2002 until April 2003 in May, where the Marminas was created. And then the mission was installed with the first team of international supervisors. And at that moment, I arrived to participate in that mission. At the beginning, it was the area was Farumia and the northern part of Peru. In December 2003, we concluded with the tasks at the Piura front and at the border El Oro in Ecuador. And we prepared the demining of the Condor Range. In this period, the seat was passed to Peru, and then from January to June 2004, and from 2004, the seat of Marminas was changed to Ecuador, in Quito, Ecuador. And in 2013, the Marminas concluded its activities in Peru and Ecuador. This was the organizational chart of the mission, a chief, a deputy chief, a logistics officer, and which I carried out. And in each country, we had a coordinator. These are the countries that contributed, almost 80 specialists and international monitors that participated in Marminas. The techniques used were the same that were used in Marminca, and these were the main mines found in this region, the Russian and Belgium and Peruvian and Brazilian mines. With regards to the operation fronts, Ecuador had three operation fronts: El Oro, Loja, and Morona in Santiago. And in Peru, they had the Piura front and the Zonas front. And in the Piura, you had two sub-fronts, Tumbes and Sullana. And here we see the map, the location of each one of these fronts. The front El Oro in Ecuador, that corresponds to the sub-front Tumbes in Peru, and Loja in Ecuador that corresponded to the front Sullana in Peru. And to the east, the Condor Range with the front Morona Santiago in Ecuador and the Amazon front in Peru. Each one of these countries elaborated a demining manual, a humanitarian demining manual that's specified and all the procedures of the international standards used. And so each country placed the different ways in which they were going to organize themselves to demine their area, respecting everything that had been foreseen in international laws of humanitarian demining. With regards to Marmina, I would like to stress the following aspects. First of all, the support of Marminca that was essential in the technical assistance and the different courses carried out. That even before the arrival of international monitors and the installment of the Marminas, and after, when the mission was already installed, we, as the pioneer team, used models of documents and lessons learned in the Marminca, which facilitated our work very much. I also want to highlight that the operational environment at the Condor Range, the vegetation was extremely inhospitable and provoked a great logistical challenge for communications and with the medical centers and other factor of success for the demining were the joint operations between Peru and Ecuador that minimized the threats presented by the Amazon jungle. So as a conclusion, in my presentation, I just wanted to highlight the importance of marmincas and marminas for the doctrine of humanitarian demining that we have today. Much of what we have today is thanks to the lessons learned and to the experience acquired in these two tasks or missions. These were missions where we dealt with an ample spectrum of mines in different environments, and we employed different demining techniques, manual, canine, and heavy equipment. These were missions that generated capacities for the countries involved and the countries that contributed, but also for the countries that received this through training of their staff and forming and preparing experts in humanitarian demining. These were missions that expanded and strengthened the awareness of the use of interpersonal mines in the countries of the American continent and highlighted the importance to eradicate anti-personnel mines from our continent, and were missions that contributed to help to be able to free our continent from landmines. Just a minute. I'm going to stop sharing to come back and be able to end my presentation. Just a minute. I just wanted to conclude my presentation once again by thanking the opportunity that was given to me to speak about these two very important missions. Once again, I want to thank the IADB for organizing this seminar, and I'm at your disposal for any clarification that is necessary. Thank you very much. Our recognition on behalf of the IADB to Brigadier General Rolando Moraes Bacarioni to understand the role of the missions Marminca and Marminas in humanitarian demining. We will continue now with our third presentation dedicated to history, the current situation and the technical capacities of humanitarian demining in Peru. Our speaker is Lieutenant Colonel Gino Ivan Vidal Robles of the Army of Peru. Throughout his career, he has been closely linked to the humanitarian demining operations, participating in the planning, execution, and supervision of removal of mines tasks in the borders and areas affected by explosive devices. His experience includes the management of specialized teams, the application of international standards, and the implementation of technical capabilities that have allowed Peru to advance significantly in the compliance of its international commitments in this subject matter. It is an honor for me to give the floor to Lieutenant Colonel Gino Ivan Vidal Robles, who is going to give us his experience and the capacities of Peru in humanitarian demining. The floor is yours. Good morning with all. Before we start, on behalf of the Army of Peru and the Center of Peru against anti-personnel mines, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Robles, and I am the director of the school of the military school in Peru. I'm very pleased to be in this seminar where I'm going to talk about a topic about the history of the use of anti-personnel mines in our country, Peru. In some seconds, I'm going to share the screen of the presentation that I have prepared.
No sé si se ve la exposición, ¿me podría confirmar?
Can you please confirm if you can see the slides? Please place the presentation mode.
Bien, ya hice la presentación. Voy a hablar acerca de la historia sobre
I'm going to talk about the history of the organization of anti-personnel mines in Peru. This is the agenda on the history of the use of anti-personnel mines in Peru, and the situation, the current situation of these in Peru, and the technical capabilities in Peru in humanitarian demining, and the requirements and difficulties that we faced. With regards to the history of the use of anti-personnel mines in Peru, this happened because of two situations that were presented in our country. One, through an internal conflict and an external conflict. Within the internal conflict, we went through a time of crisis through the heroism time in between the 80s to the year 2000. In this process, the reasons why they employed anti-personnel mines was to protect our country. In this process, the terrorist criminals, in order to destroy the confidence of the people, started destroying all the towers and the main. They destroyed more than 1,000 of these tension towers until 1979. So then the state of Peru decided to protect these towers by the army and said that they should employ the conventional use anti-personnel mines to protect these towers and also protect the center of transmission and the prison. And so they protected more than 20,000 of these towers. And in this process, they were able to place all these mines until the end of the conflict. And after this, in 1995, there was the conflict with Peru. And the reason why we employed these anti-personnel mines in this conflict were because a legitimate defense. We have to understand that Peru in 1995 was not part of the Ottawa Treaty. And so, in one way, the use of anti-personnel mines was permitted. And in face of these actions, then we planted more than 30,800 anti-personnel mines in an area of 12,000 square miles. And we had, and they also planted like 11,000 mines. This is why we employed the anti-personnel mines in Peru. And that later, after these conflicts, these mines started to become a threat for our population. And in the area of Mica, the state of Peru undertook certain actions. And these are the actions that gave us the legal framework for us to carry out this process. In 1995, there was a ceasefire in the Cenepa conflict. And from February 17, 1995, we started with peace negotiations between the two countries that became a fact in 1998 through the Treaty of Manatee, where both countries ended the conflict and delimited the borders. In 1999, parallel to this, the state of Peru became part of the Convention on the Prohibition of the Employment, Production, and Transfer of Anti-Personnel Mines and its destruction, known as the Ottawa Convention. And Peru ratified it in 1999, and it was became effective in March 1999. In face of this situation, the state of Peru in 98, with the Supreme Decree 058, created 3 battalions for humanitarian demining, number 111, 115, and 116, that were the battalions responsible to comply with the mandate of Peru in this convention. In 2002, they became companies, the battalions became companies and continued. And in 2005, the state of Peru created the Center Against Anti-Personal Mines that was called Contraminas. That was in 2002. And they were responsible to comply with a commitment that the state had contracted. In 2005, they approved the regulation against mines to give it a legal framework. And in 2006, finally, they enacted a law that sanctions all the conducts contrary to the Convention of Ottawa. In 2009, the Procedures Manual for the Humanitarian Demining of Peru was approved. That was updated last year in 2024. In 2009, we created the Peruvian Demining School through the operation with the United States, where and I'm going to explain later, because from here on, we established the new procedures according to international standards within the humanitarian demining. And finally, in 2004, the National Plan of Actions Against Anti-Personal Mines of 2025-2029 was approved, which is in force right now, and that we hope that in 2029 we will be able to comply with the purpose of our country to become free of personal mines. This is the organizational chart of the system of actions against the mines in Peru. The maximum authority was the state of Peru, and then we have the executive center that had 6 ministries: foreign affairs, health, education, and the Ministry of Development and Social Inclusion, and the Ministry of the Interior. The line organs that were in charge of executing was the Army of Peru and the National Police that were responsible for carrying out the tasks of humanitarian demining, and the National Council for the integration of persons with some type of effect of these personal mines. And the specialized units were the General Directorate for Humanitarian Demining with 3 companies, which are the ones that were in charge of doing the job. And here I want to stop with regards to the company of the demining of devices, and because of the terrorists that we had in our country, this company had to be deployed to that sector to give support to the demining and combat to our patrols that were full of these mines of the terrorists in our land. So these companies right now are carrying out this combat. And we have the DICOMIN of the police that basically was given the mission of carrying out the deactivation and destruction of personal mines in the towers, the high-tension towers, basically in the internal part of our country.
With regards to the current situation of the mines in our country, I want to set us in the framework where the operations are being carried out. Everything is focused on the north part of Peru, specifically in the Amazonas department, in the province Condorcanqui, and in the districts that we've worked at are the borderline of the districts of Rio Santiago and El Cenepa. This is where all of the topic of the work that we have developed is concentrated. This work implies a terrestrial movement to the zone of Uracusa So it's an approximate of 14 hours from Chiclayo to Uracusa, and in Uracusa, we had the access to the operations. We had to go by air because we didn't have a terrestrial means of transportation, and this made things a little bit more complicated. This is the current situation of how the process of demining was carried out in our country. With the signing of the Ottawa Covenant, we had a term of 10 years to complete this process. In this process, this plan against anti-personal mines was signed in our country, was done, and the mines that were in our arsenals also were started to being destroyed, and also the police started to destroy the mines that were planted in the high tension towers. So in this process, work of military demining was being done. We didn't have the techniques of humanitarian demining that was brought by the United States. So in this process, we destroyed 4,000 mines, about 4,000, and the Peruvian state started to request an extension, and the National Plan of Action Against Mines was approved from 2009 to 2016. So we were focused on destroying the anti-personal mines that we had planted in the borderline during the conflict in Ecuador. In this process, 11,000 mines approximately were destroyed in 221,582 square meters. This is a very important situation that happened in Ecuador in 2013 as a byproduct of the bilateral meetings that we had among both countries to improve our humanitarian demining processes. A report of dangerous areas were delivered. So in an area of 516,000 square meters and a total amount of 11,000 mines. So these were planted within the Peruvian territory. This obliges the Peruvian state to request an extension, and the National Plan of Action Against Anti-Personal Mines was planned for 2017 to 2024. So it was expected that up to December 2024, we could finish this humanitarian demining process in Peru, but up until last year, we only destroyed 91 mine fields. 7,000 mines were destroyed, and the reasons were different. The topic of the pandemic, we couldn't work for 2 years in the demining. Also, there were some budget cuts and external situations such as the rise of fuel prices and other aspects that didn't allow us to finish with this process. So the Peruvian states in the convention in Cambodia, they approved the national plan against mines for 2025 and 2029, and this is active currently. And we have estimated to finish with 46 mine fields and to destroy 3,997 mines in an area of 200,000 square meters approximately. So we are planning to culminate this process in 2030. Here I'm going to talk about the action plan against mines for 2025 to 2029, which was approved last year in this meeting of states, which was done in Cambodia. So this plan, we have been working in the sector of Achuime, where we have planned to destroy 392 mines in 18 fields. The sector is located in Cenepa. There's 3 sectors, the sector of Cenepa, Achuime, and PV Gutierrez, with their respective anti-personal mines, and this is a challenge that we have to culminate this process in 2029. With regards to the capabilities, the technical capabilities of Peru, we have the School of Humanitarian Demining, which was created in the year 2009 in Peru. And from that point on, through the cooperation between the United States and Peru, the company Ronjoy started coming to train Ronjo to train the personnel in accordance with the international humanitarian norms. So the humanitarian demining process starts in Peru because we adapted our norms to the international norms, the procedures, the techniques, mens per cell, which is what we keep right now. And so the demining school teaches different courses which are important for the process so that the work of demining is done in Peru. We have the retraining of supervisors. It's the basic course of humanitarian demining. Also the supervisors course, the quality course, the clearing basic course, also the cleaning of a battle area for supervisors, the maintenance of metal detectors course, also the vital support advanced course of pre-hospital trauma, also the course for dogs, detectors of mines, and the destruction, also the course for destruction of explosives, which we find during the demining process. So this is a very important capability. Also, the School of Humanitarian Demining has a canine unit. We have 6 dogs, demining dogs, and they come in and do the external quality control together with the specialists. So along the process of the creation of the school, we have trained more than 1,260 men of the Army of Peru, of the police, 570 from other countries. Also, other people have come to be trained in new procedures of humanitarian demining. This is a strength because we have a lot of deminers in the territory of Peru who may be employed whenever we require them. Also, the organization that we have, this is a strength for us because it is well structured, the whole process of humanitarian demining. As I expressed, we have the Ministry of Defense and the police, the Ministry of the Interior, who are in charge of this work. Also, the 2 companies of disactivating explosives who are dedicated specifically to humanitarian demining. We have people with experience, with trainings, with a lot of professionalism, and they are doing this work. And also the School of Demining, they are in charge of training and to certify the personnel. We have 60 men who are working in the humanitarian demining. These are 50 people that are coming from the explosives and 6 deminers from the National Police of Peru. Then the internal control is done by 4 supervisors who are part of the direction of humanitarian demining, and then the external quality control, the countermines are doing this work, 2 supervisors and 2 dogs and 2 canine guides. We have the equipment, which are the metal detectors, MineLab F3, EPP ROFI, also the SEA detectors. Something important that I want to mention is that when the school was created, external aid was brought, also new detectors, equipment, logistics for all the process of humanitarian demining which was planned, that was supposed to finish in 2006, but as of today, we are still in the process of acquiring new equipment so that we can finish in 2030 this very important work. Another strength is also the bilateral demining that we've had with the country, Ecuador. We faced each other before, and now we have the disposition of doing a bilateral work. We had a binational squad And this was an example of brotherhood and friendship in the world, because both countries have a common goal. We have combined squads. There was mutual trust. We showed commitment that Peru and Ecuador, we were committed to free our land of these mines, anti-personnel mines, and this was unique in the region and in the world. So I mentioned this because this allowed us to liberate, to destroy more than 582 anti-personnel mines in an area of 19,000 square meters. This is a strength because in the bilateral meetings that we do every year with Ecuador, we have this commitment and this predisposition of supporting and activating this binational unity whenever this is required. So this is a strength for us. So within this, of course, we have challenges that have allowed that have made it impossible for us to comply with our commitments of demining in the border. The geographical configuration, the work that is being done is in a very harsh area. There's no terrestrial access, it's only by air. And of course, we depend on the weather. The weather has an important role. When it rains, the helicopter cannot come in, or when we are in the area of work, if there's adverse weather conditions, the helicopter cannot move, then we cannot work, because in case there's an accident, there's no adequate evacuation that can take place. The budget is also a very important factor because it has been reduced on time. I'm going to explain what the budget is. It's approximately $200,000. And the distance, the difficulty of the access to enter into the operations area, the equipment that as of now, it has already complied with its life term. Also, there's external factors. Sometimes also foreign countries donate some detectors, also 2 demining dogs are being donated and other equipment to increase our operational capabilities, and external factors such as COVID, for example, which impeded us to continue with our work, external factors such as the rise of fuel prices, and this was affected because the budget could not be adapted to the situation, so we had to do less work. Then on the budget, we can see that from 2012 as of now, there has been a considerable cut in the budget. We have a budget of 2,193,000 sons, so and soles, and which is national currency, and so also the helicopter is what takes up most of the budget. It is an important tool for our work. So the requirements of equipment that we need to optimize our work is detection equipment, protection suits, communication equipment, georeferential equipment, also tents, vehicles, ambulance, bags, first aid bags, renovation of the K9 unit, also equipment of logistics and approval of material. So we are in the process of acquiring this material, and we are facing this commitment that our countries have of the international community. This is the photographs of the work that is being done. This, of course, as you can see, the land is, the territory is harsh. These are the TAV1, which are Brazilian. And then we have here the quality control, which is done by the K9 unit. And then the access, sometimes we have to employ military techniques. Hard rock techniques, we did an extraction technique. As you can see in the pictures here, our personnel, through this technique, it had to be hooked to comply with this very important work. Then here we have more pictures on the humanitarian demining process. The weather was extreme in other sectors, in the sector of Cuangos. We entered through the far rock technique. So this also makes it difficult for us to do our work because to install the tents requires a lot of time. So this is how I end my presentation, and I want to acknowledge all of my demining colleagues, number 11 and number 116, who are doing this very important work to demine Peru. So I want to acknowledge them and all of the deminers of our region who are complying with this very noble mission of eliminating this threat which harms our population so much. Thank you. We want to thank Lieutenant Colonel Gino Vidal Robles for his valuable presentation and for sharing his wide experience and the efforts of Peru in the topic of humanitarian demining. Now we will make a pause of 10 minutes before we continue with our schedule. When we return, we will have 4 additional presentations that are equally relevant than the ones that were presented in the first part of the seminar. Please remain connected and join us on time so that we can continue with our foreseen activities.
Pero ya apareces tú, pues, weón. Debería haber abajo participantes 16, 15.
¿Se ven bien? Es que no.
Tras la pausa, damos inicio a la cuarta ponencia de este seminario, enfocada en la historia, la situación actual y las capacidades técnicas de desminado humanitario en la República de Chile. Nuestro ponente es el coronel Rodrigo Suazo García, del Ejército de Chile.
Our speaker is Colonel from Chile, Rodrigo Suazo Garcia,
Director
head
of
of the
Strategic
Department of
Logistics and Chief
Implementation
of the Implementation Plan Munitions in Racimo, in the General Staff, with a career in Engineering Unit and a trajectory in Command and Logistic trajectory. He has worked in mine camps in the north and south of Chile in accordance with international norms. His expertise allows him to offer the efforts of Chile in the eradication of anti-personnel mines. Next, we will listen to Colonel Rodrigo Suazo Garcia, who will be sharing with us the work and the progress of Chile in eradicating anti-personnel mines. The floor is yours. Thank you. Good morning. I am Colonel Rodrigo Suazo Garcia from the Army of Chile. And in the first place, I want to thank you for this invitation. And I want to greet all of the audience who are watching us in this seminar. And in the name of the Chief of the General Staff, General Rodar Gutierrez, from the General Staff, and I want to thank this invitation. Thank you for this invitation that the IADB gave to us to provide information on the history of demining in Chile, the current situation. I'm going to share the presentation.
No sé si se está viendo la presentación.
I don't know if you can see the presentation.
¿Puede colocarla en modo presentación, por favor?
Ahí sí me pueden decir si se ve en modo presentación.
Sí, ya la tenemos. Gracias.
Bien.
Yes, we have the presentation. Thank you.
Empezar, ese es el temario.
So in order to begin, this is the topics. So we have the history of the utilization of mines in Chile, how we organized ourselves, the areas that have been considered in Chile as contaminated with anti-personnel mines, some important factors that were considered for the work as well, the preparation of the means, objectives, and challenges, the current situation that we have of anti-personnel mines, and lastly, the lessons learned and some conclusions. As far as the history of the utilization of mines, anti-personnel mines in Chile, most of the mines were planted or installed in Chile in the decade of the 70s or 80s, where Chile was experimenting a crisis with its neighboring countries. And we have to consider that this was under the context of the attitude or defense strategy that Chile has. So the existence of the anti-personnel mines has to be understood within the context of defensive strategy and the defensive policies, and its tactic use was also destined to put an obstacle, the coming forward of another foreign army. So this is why these anti-personnel mines were installed in certain parts of the national territory. It is important to highlight that all of the fields that were planted back then by the armed forces, be it Army, Air Force, were registered in detail in accordance with the methodology that was used at the time. This methodology was mainly because since there was not so much technology, they were printed in paper, in maps or topographic letters, and they were there was a detail of where each mine was. So in that sense, the mines that were considered, that were planted back then, were 123,421 mines, 183 mined fields, and 16 areas of danger in the national territory. How did we organize ourselves once the Chile ratified and adopted the Ottawa Convention? As you can see on the screen, on the 2nd of May of 2002, the National Commission of Demining was created, which was a public organism with multi-sectoral representation and national character, who had the task of advising and coordinating the action activities against the mines. So on May 2nd of 2002, the commission was created through a decree that you are looking here on the screen. And the President of the Republic was heading this, and the Ministry of National Defense was the president of the Executive Secretary, which was the organ of work that this organization had. So as you can see, all of the state institutions were supporting this task and this challenge that we had, which was to clear all the areas that were polluted with anti-personnel mines. The organization of this executive secretary was composed mainly by 3 areas. One area of personnel, an operations area, and the area that always needs to be there, which is logistics and administrative support. So in the personnel area, which is human resources, in the last part, which is the assistance to victims. In the next slide, I'm going to speak a little bit more about this specific area. In the operations area, we have an important area, which is prevention and education. And this prevention and education, we emphasized talks and education, training in the schools and the communities that were closer to these areas that were contaminated with anti-personnel mines. And this work, we dedicated time and personnel for this work, and this would allow people to detect if they were in a dangerous area, an anti-personnel mines area or a contaminated area. And then in logistics, this is, of course, always very important to support everything that has to do with maintenance, fuel distribution, for example, the systems of communication, etc. And this is how it was organized, mainly this executive secretary. Then with regards to the assistance to the victims, on July 25th of 2017, a law was created, the law 21.021. And in September of 2018, the rules for this law was approved. So what is this law about? It's about assistance and rehabilitating and social inclusion for the victims of accidents caused by mines or other explosives, which are military in nature. Then this is when we started the counting of the victims. We had a cadastre of 200 victims, 216 victims, and we had medical assistance granted to them from 2016 to 2020. What was the situation of the mined areas back then? When the convention was signed, Chile was presenting this situation of mines throughout their territory. In the region of Arica and Parinacota, Tarapacá and Antofagasta, this is all in the north of Chile. Specifically in the region of Arica and Parinacota, we had 95 mined fields. In Tarapacá, we had 7 fields and 1 dangerous area. In the Antofagasta area, we had 52 minefields and 1 dangerous area. In Valparaiso, we had 1 minefield and 1 dangerous area. In the metropolitan area of Santiago, we had just 1 dangerous area. And in the region of Magallanes and Antarctica, we had 28 minefields. So this was a total of 183 minefields and 16 dangerous areas.
If we add all these, the total was 23,290,000 square meters of surface that were under this condition with anti-personnel mines. So what were the important factors considered for this task, especially by this executive secretariat that coordinated the National Program of Action Against Mines? 4 main factors: the clear definition of objectives. First of all, one of the main actions that we resolved was the destruction of the anti-personnel mines in stock. And for that, we had to comply with Article 4 of the Convention, the clearing of the mined areas and also victims. And the planning, the precise planning by phases and periods. And this considered the planning and the preparation with the local authorities and priorities. They had to define the priorities. And this was made it together with the conversations with the local authorities in the zones where the mined fields existed, and also the contaminated areas. Then action against mines and humanitarian demining, and then the removal later on. And we also used a methodology that for this case were the international standards, IMS, also the national standard of Chile through the manuals and procedure manuals and the armed forces procedures and evaluations of the process of demining. The most important of all these 4 factors was the commitment of all the stakeholders involved that consisted in the total support to the organizations and institutions of the government that supported or carried out some activities against mines and humanitarian demining. What was the preparation for this job? Well, first of all, the training in demining. And the first activity, the first demining training and was carried out, and it should be permanent, and it should be developed in a responsible way with great professionalism. For this, we asked help to the international world, and about 100 people from our staff and our different institutions were trained in a foreign country, and 1,321 were trained here in our national territory of Chile. And besides this, it is also very important to name international cooperation accepted by Chile through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Defense to, through them, obtain all the resources and support with materials that were necessary. Like, for instance, the fields habilitation, it was very, very important because they gave everything that was required for these fields as personal protection equipment for the protection of the deminers that were on the terrain working in this demining process. And then the clearing tools, as you can see on the pictures, metal detectors that were so important, and with the software necessary to be able to detect and record the location of each one of these mines, as well as telecommunication equipment, because the people needed to communicate, and then management software, both nationally and internationally. Compliance with the objectives. How did we comply with the objectives? Well, in August of 2003, we finished the plan for the destruction of mines in stock, destroying about 300,039 anti-personnel mines in total. This, through the years, continued, and we destroyed more mines until the year 2019, where we ended with the total destruction of the anti-personnel mines retained according to Article 3 of the Ottawa Convention. And on 27 February 2020, we reached the destruction of all the mines that we had in stock, like and the ones that were retained and the ones that were on the terrain. And we complied with everything that was said in Article 3. And we had 89 cleared, 69 cleared areas and 2 cleared mined areas. And in the region of Santiago, we had 1 cleared mined area, and in the Magallanes and Antarctica area, we had 33 demined areas. And with this, we complied with Article 3 and 4 of the Convention. And finally, at the country level, the areas that were cleared, that were mined, were 200. The destroyed mines were almost 180,000 mines, 120,000 anti-personnel mines, and 58,000 anti-vehicle mines. And the terrains that were freed, or the areas freed, reached 25 million and a half of square meters, and more additional 2 million square meters, totalizing 27,560 areas freed in the national territory. What were the lessons learned of this operation of demining and logistics? The demining operations at 4,000 meters over sea level was an important challenge, since the height has affects human beings and also the materials. And this is due to what is called the low pressure or hypobaria, and that affects, and it's something that is called toxic and affects physically and mentally. And this had to be trained and overcome. And the equipment was special for the extreme cold, and the variability of temperatures between night and day is drastic. In the day, we can have temperatures of 25 degrees, and at 9, -10, -15. And we needed special care. And we had the aeromedical group also, because the atmospheric pressure also had quite a lot of variances. And so it was very important to be to take great care and to take all this into consideration, and to have the special logistical care and logistical plan. We had to see that the operations were both during winter and during summer. So we had rain throughout the year, and demining operations in the extreme south. And the climate factor is an important factor, as well as the health support that has to be very well planned, taken into account certain pavilions for stabilization at the islands because we were quite isolated. And so we agreed with Argentina for the air evacuation as a first measure. And if there was a greater emergency, then we would transfer people by air to Punta Arenas. The communication systems were also affected by the climate. Nevertheless, there is always some alternative. Satellite telephones is very important in this case. The demining in the coast desert also affected the atmospheric conditions, and especially heat for the unit, because people become dehydrated. The special measures to operate near the airport and international highways. You have to be very careful because the flow of cars to the airport and the flow of civilians that used this path interrupted the normal traffic. So we decided to demine and to clear all the affected areas during nighttime. And this was able to be done thanks to the training, the special training that the staff received. What is the current situation of mines in Chile? Anti-personal mines. Well, once again, I want to reiterate that in February 27, 2020, we complied with the removal and total destruction of anti-personal mines in our national territory. And to this date, we don't have any anti-personal mines in stock or any retained according to Article 3 of the Convention of Ottawa. We also want to say that the country was able to clear and free all the mined areas within the term established, destroying more than 179,000 mines between anti-personal and anti-vehicle, and recovered more than 27 million square meters of land. So since 2020, Chile is free of anti-personal mines and was declared a country free of these weapons. And right now, we keep controls over the zones that used to be mined, and we execute some periodical campaigns and for the prevention of accidents in the communities that are nearby. And these will continue. And there are also protocols, clear institutional protocols to respond to this, to the finding of new suspicious areas, if any should arise. For example, in the what we do is to delimit areas, and we the signalization of the areas as well. That helps. And some conclusions are: first of all, the use of anti-personal mines was due to the threat of conflict and its defensive strategy, considering that this happened 50 or more than 50 years ago. And secondly, the planning and organization that was designed was a key factor to comply with the objectives that we had set. Thirdly, the training and cooperation by international community contributed to the national plan for an action against mines. And finally, after a continuous work of 18 years and a very professional work by the armed forces, we finally, Chile was declared a country free of mines. So this has been my presentation, and thank you very much for your invitation to this seminar. And thank you very much. I will be expecting your questions through the social media. Thank you. We thank Colonel Rodrigo Suazo for his clear presentation on the advancements and capacities of Chile's in humanitarian demining. Now, our fifth presentation, the history, current situation, and the technical capacities of the humanitarian demining in Ecuador. Our speaker is Captain Navarro Sarasti Richard Fernando, head of operations of the humanitarian demining of the Engineer Battalion 68 Cotopaxi. He has a BA in military sciences and has developed key tasks as head of the platoon and also in the removal of mines. His experience includes the application of advanced techniques in the neutralization and destruction of explosive devices and the education of specialized staff contributing to the compliance of the international commitments of Ecuador with regards to demining. Captain Richard Fernando Navarro Sarasti, you have the floor to talk about your experience and achievements in Ecuador. Good morning, Captain Navarro Richard, head of operations of the Battalion of Engineers 68 Cotopaxi. As far as humanitarian demining, I'm going to share the presentation with you. I don't know if we have the presentation visible here. Yes. For Ecuador, it is an honor to be able to carry out this presentation about the history of personal mines in the country and the technical capacities that Ecuador has. We're going to show you a video. As you were able to observe within the geography of our country, the majority is jungle. That's why the conditions, both the climate way and geographically, and the conditions by air and river is quite complicated for the humanitarian demining operations. We have a concept of a mine. Any explosive device designed to be placed under, over, or near the surface or any other surface conceived to detonate by the presence or the proximity of a person or vehicle. Among the main mines that we have found in the between Ecuador and Peru has been the PMD6, the PMD3, PRBNR 409, and 35 P4B, CCTEC VS50, and TEP1 in the different targets that the deminers found. As far as directional mines, we have found the Claymore and Mount 5090 that due to the geographical situation were found in the provinces of Loja and Nor. As a background, we have that in 1995, the armed conflict between Peru and Ecuador, and in 1997, Ecuador signed the convention or the Ottawa Convention. In 1998, we had the MOMEP Tamariti with observers to verify the compliance with the peace agreement between Ecuador and Peru. In 1989, we created the CETESMI for Ecuador and also the Contraminas for Peru. In the year 2000, Ecuador started with its operation of humanitarian demining, and before 2000, we were already carrying out some demining, but military demining operations. In 2002, Ecuador signed the agreement with the OAS. In 2008, due to the different situations, both the geographical, climate, and the conditions of access, as I mentioned, by air and river to the different targets, Ecuador did not comply with the terms. And so in 2028, we did the first term extension. In 2013, we finished the agreement with the OAS, and in 2014, the state of Ecuador launched its first project of investment to comply with international treaties and continue with the demining actions. In 2016, unfortunately, we had a catastrophe, a natural catastrophe, an earthquake, and we stopped the humanitarian demining operations. And due to that, in the year 2018, when we did not comply with the term established, we launched a second extension of term. In 2020 and 2021, at the world level, we had the COVID-19, and once again, we stopped the operations, demining operations, and the Ecuadorian state used all its capacities to resolve the COVID-19 and the earthquake. That's why in 2022, the state of Ecuador, to comply once again with the international commitments, launched its second investment project to free the lands contaminated with mines. In 2022, when we did not comply with the term, we asked for a third extension of the term. And in 2022, we started the humanitarian demining operations once again, once we resolved all the other issues until 2025. As far as the areas infected with mines in Ecuador, we had 5 provinces with mines: the Oro, Loja, Zamora, Chinchipe, Morona, Santiago, and Pastaza. This gave us a total of 222 areas with mines, a total of 591,797.53 square meters that represented 20.83 of our national territory. Within the use of the mines by Ecuador and our military doctrine, especially for the engineering corps, we have the missions of mobility, counter-mobility, and engineering in general. In this case, in 1995, in the conflict, we carried out the counter-mobility as a defense for our bases that were at the border. So for this, we had some reinforcement obstacles and protection that were placed in the border in the different bases of Ecuador. As far as the current situation of anti-personnel mines, we have cleared 98% of the territory contaminated by anti-personnel mines in Loja, Pastaza, Morona, Santiago, and part of Zamora, Chinchipe, where we are operating right now together with the staff of deminers. We have been able to free 581,833.66 square meters, and we have been able to destroy 20,611 anti-personnel mines. In Article 3, we have retained 13 mines, anti-personnel mines, to carry out the instruction and the training of the different courses. In Article 4, we have destroyed 260,302 stored mines and 12,611 anti-personnel mines, 74 anti-tank mines, and 91 remains of war in the different operations that we had. Here we have a summary chart of the humanitarian demining within Ecuador since the year 2000, when it started, until the year 2024, with which we have been able to free an area of 581,833.56 square meters and destroyed 12,812 anti-personnel mines and 74 anti-tank and 91 remains of war. Likewise, in this chart, you can see the current situation of mines in Ecuador. We had a total area of 591,797.56 square meters. And right now we have only 2% to be cleared for the year 26 and 27 in the province of Zamora Chinchipe, which is 9,700 square meters, and the destruction of 13,000 mines that are foreseen. As far as the quality control in the provinces of El Oro, Loja, and part of the Pastaza province. As challenges for Ecuador, we have in each year, Ecuador has been complying with certain objectives. For the year 2022, we carried out the clearance of 8,103 square meters, complying with 100%. In 2023, we cleared 11,989, that is again 100%. In 2024, we cleared 10,004 square meters, complying 100% with our target. Unfortunately, in 2025, due to the current situation of the country as far as the armed conflict that is not international, all the efforts were concentrated by the state to solve this problem and suspended the operations of Ecuador in humanitarian demining for 2025. But they have been planned to continue in 2026, 2027, with only 9,000 square meters that are still pending to be cleared. And normally, the deminers are working with around 10 deminers each for the annual operations. The geographical location of the areas that are pending for 26 and 27 in Zamora Chinchipe are in Miasi, Zumba, Paquiche Alto, and Condor Mirador that has a peculiarity because we don't have the coordinates, but rather some reference points like the old bases, the base of Tunguragua, the base of Aguarico, and Cenepita. As far as the quality control, as we mentioned before, we are also pending to comply with certain targets in the different provinces in which Ecuador requires international support to carry out external quality control. And these areas were cleared in 2005 to 2013 in the province of Pastaza and in Morona, Santiago, and also in Zamora, Chinchipe, 35 targets that we still have pending that are that we will continue in 26, 27. As far as the technical current capacities and as materials and equipment, thanks to the donations and different investment projects by the state, we have detectors, F3 detectors, admin, and Balon, and CIA. As far as the different vests we have from Bulgaria, American, and Canadian. And as far as the mechanical with robots, we have a robot MV4 docking. And we also have the canine teams that detect the mines that are being used both for the internal quality control and external quality control. And what is referred to the different trainings that Ecuador has, we have carried out several trainings in different countries, and likewise by the School of the Corporate of Engineering in Ecuador, and the basic course on demining, and the supervisor demining, and the quality of demining, and the clearing of fields, and 3 more at this moment. In Colombia, we had the military demining course, humanitarian demining, operational effectiveness, and in Peru, we had the course of demining, supervisors of demining, and demining quality control and battle demining. In Spain, we received the DOD-3. In Italy, the training on demining and DOD. In Croatia, the training of the robot. And from the Southern Command, we were trained in CLS, ASM, which is the medical tactic operational and the repair workshop for MineLab F3, and the training as far as the detectors Ballon, VM3G, and the BAC. This has been everything with regards to the Ecuador presentation. And likewise, for me, it is a great pleasure to be able to address you once again. I am ready for any question that you might have, and thank you very much for everything. And I want to congratulate the personnel, the deminers of Ecuador that have carried an excellent job. And we have hope that for 2027, we will be able to name Ecuador as a country free of mines. Thank you.
Our thanks to Captain Navarro Sarasti for sharing his experience and the important progresses reached by Ecuador on humanitarian demining. We will continue with our next presentation dedicated to history, the current situation, and the technical capabilities for humanitarian demining in the Republic of Colombia. Our presenter is Mr. Manuel Alejandro Cardona Lopez, an advisor of the group AICMA in Colombia. With more than 21 years of experience, he has led units of DoD and humanitarian demining processes, formulating policies and national processes, as well as technical protocols for the safe removal of explosives. He's a survivor of an anti-personnel mine, so his commitment with the cause is being reflected in his wide trajectory in the management of operation, training of equipment, specialized teams, and international and national experiences in humanitarian demining. I invite Mr. Manuel Alejandro Cardona Lopez to address us and to share his experience and vision on the history of anti-personnel mines in Colombia. The floor is yours. Thank you very much to the Inter-American Defense Board for the invitation that has been given to our country. Thanks for this space. We expect you to understand what the history of this problem in Colombia. With regards to this issue, I wanted to confirm with you or ask you, to whoever is looking at us, if you can see our slides. Yes, we can see them correctly. So in order to start, we're going to talk about something important. We're going to contextualize the problem of anti-personnel mines in the territory within the definitions, within all the literature that you can find in the protocols of the CCW, in the EITG. The definition never discriminates among the industrially made ones and the improvised main ones. Here you can see that this one was improvisedly made, and this is activated by the victim, and it is important based on this premise and the definition. And the definition is the same, and in no literature can we find a difference. So based on this premise, we're going to start talking about the history of the problems of the mines internationally and in the Colombian territory. We have, in the year 1277, we have a subterranean mine which consisted on a flag that was buried, so that when the Mongolians, when they retrieved it, it was inside a base that contained this powder. And so then on the century 17 and 18, we had the flatter mine in Europe, which was activated through a string. And this premise is very important because General Gabriel James Rains, he modified a munition, a bullet, a cannon bullet, and he modified his switch in English, and he modified it. And he was a Confederate. And so the General of the Union, General George Brinton McClellan, said this weapon has a war conduct that is barbaric and bloody. And so the Confederate general said, we cannot take this type of weapons because they are against humanity and against the rights of war. This is something important because once this war was finished, the Union people would make the Confederates walk on them. And so there was this word deep mining, which it means negation. So then basically in 1880, in the wars of Africa and Sudan, the hordes of the natives were stopped with munitions, modified munitions. Also in the Russian-Japanese War in 1904, something similar happened. There was small modifications because they started using electrical devices in the First World War. First, there were munitions of artillery that were modified by the Germans to stop the progress of the first English tanks. But when they saw that they were they started building bridges and they started clearing the areas, they started setting up some traps for them. So they started modifying these munitions. This is what we call anti-personnel mines. Then in the Second World War, we have the German mine, Holz Mine 42 or PMD, which is Russian-made. So why are we talking about all these historical aspects? Because we want to have a context, the international context, also the context that we have in Colombia, and there's many similarities of this type of fabrication of mines that we have. Then in the 1950s, we have one of the most densely mined areas in North Korea and South Korea, and they're still in conflict. None of them have signed a demining agreement. So, thanks to Colonel of Chile, there's a difference between a mined area and a mined field. We have to contextualize, because when it has been marked, it is a mined field, but when it hasn't, then it is a mined area. Now we're going to move to one of the conflicts in the peninsula of India and China. And these were the modification of ammunitions also to be used as anti-personnel mines. And the parts in conflict were using industrial mines, but there were also present other ammunitions or mines which were improvisedly made. So they would pick up all the material and they would use this composition of the ammunitions to move forward and to build mines in an improvised way. We have also in Israel, for example, they have modified also ammunitions, and also Pol Pot would talk about a mine, which is a perfect soldier because it doesn't need food, it doesn't have many needs. And now we're going to move on to the national context. Colombia was aware of the construction of these type of weapons for conflicts. They were trying to protect bases from non-state groups. Colombia was using mines North American mines,
o la belga, la PMR 409.
for example,
Y a
PMR
partir de esos modelos, Colombia, la industria minera
B
colombiana fabricó la mina
409,
antipersonal
and
1 y
based
la
on
mina
that,
antipersonal
also
2.
the anti-personal
Bien,
mine
cuando
1 and
Colombia
2 were built.
suscribió el
When
protocolo 2
Colombia
luego
signed
de
the Protocol 2
1980,
in
cesó estas
1980,
actividades. Y
these
por medio de
activities
la ley
ceased.
469 del 2008,
And through the law
la industria minera
469
en
of
Colombia
1998,
cesó y
the
destruyó
military
todo ese
industry in
nivel de
Colombia
producción el
ceased and
18 de
destroyed all
noviembre
of
de
their production. And in
1999. Hasta ahí llegó la producción y
1999,
también
it
después del
ceased
protocolo 2
operation,
en ese acuerdo,
production.
Colombia
And then
hizo
after
parte de la
this
Comisión
protocol,
de Prohibición
Colombia
de
was
Minas
part of the
Antipersonales.
Commission of
35
Provision of
meses a la
Anti-Personal Mines.
fecha hoy, a la fecha
Then,
hoy ya
as of
no
today,
existen estas minas antipersonales en nuestro
these
territorio nacional.
anti-personal mines are inexistent in
Colombia
our
se
national
desarmó más de
territory.
18.000 metros cuadrados
More than
todo esto hizo parte del
18,000
cumplimiento
square
del
meters were
2015.
cleared, and this
Pero
was
miremos en la situación
part
del
of
conflicto
the
interno
compliance.
internacional en Colombia.
Then let's look
Desde
at the
1950
international conflict in
existía
Colombia.
una
Since
problemática. Las guerrillas
1950, we
liberales
had a problem.
utilizaron unas
The
ollas
liberal
quemadas con
guerrillas,
explosivos donde
they
está
were
debidamente
using
documentado.
pots charged
Pero
with
aquí encontramos una
explosives.
primera similitud. Sin que decir que ellos
This is a
cursaron
similarity
o
here.
estudiaron lo que sucedió
So
con
they
la
didn't
mina
study what
subterránea, la mina
happened
que
with
se
the
produjo
subterranean
en
mines
Asia,
that were
ellos
used
emplearon
in China. They
estas ollas
used
cargadas con
these
explosivos.
pots
Luego llegó en los
loaded with
70 un
explosives,
grupos
and
armados no
then in the
estatales que empezaba a
70s,
traer la estrategia Chanta 20
non-state
al territorio
groups
nacional.
started to
Otros grupos
bring.
armados no estatales
Also, other
ejecutaban robos
non-state
en
groups
instalaciones militares
were
y instalaban también minas.
robbing from
Pero fue
military
en los años
institutions, and they were
88
installing mines.
donde
But in
los diferentes grupos
1980,
armados no estatales empezaron a encontrar
different
la estrategia
non-state
80-20,
groups started
80%
to find
acciones con
the
minas subterráneas,
strategy in
acciones
80-20.
con minas 80% de acciones con minas
80% of
antipersonales y un 20% de acciones
their
militares,
actions were with
haciendo
mines,
que
anti-personal mines, and 20%
proliferación
were
de estas minas
military actions.
fuera
So
algo
the use and the
común
proliferation of these
para
mines
poder
was something
enfrentar la
very
fuerza
common
pública.
to be able to
Pasamos
face
hacia
the
la
public
legislación
forces.
colombiana.
Now we're going
Colombia,
to move
junto
to
pues con
the
estas
Colombian
legislaciones internacionales
legislation.
y el
Colombia
conjunto
then,
de
with the
situaciones
three
convencionales
international
traída por la ley
legislations,
469 del
the
98,
Convention for
empezaron a
Certain
restringirlas. Ahí es
Conventional
lo que les contaba
Weapons,
del
and
cese
in
como tal que se
1980
tenía
started restricting,
del uso
for
o de
example,
la fabricación que
the
teníamos
seizing
por
of the
medio de la industria
use
militar
or the
cumplida el 18 de
fabrication.
noviembre de 1999.
So this was
Pasamos a la
being
Convención de
complied in
Prohibición de Minas
1999.
Antipersonales, en donde
And then we
Colombia
had the Convention
aprobó
for the
la ley
Prohibition of
554
Anti-Personal Mines.
y la ley 759 del
And this was
2002.
introduced
Y
by the
comenzar
Law
con estas dos.
554 and Law
También tenemos la Convención de Prevención del
759 in
Racismo con las
2002.
leyes de la
Also, we
ley
had the Convention of
1604 del 2006.
Ammunitions
Bien, pero el problema en
in
Colombia en
branch.
realidad no son las minas
But the problem in
antipersonal
Colombia actually are
industriales. El
not the
problema es
mines that
los
have
grupos
been
armados no
industrially
estatales
made, but the
que
problem
como es
is
un arma muy
the
fácil de
armed
conseguir,
non-state
muy
groups, because
fácil de
these are very
construir,
easy weapons to
emplean
get and easy to
sustancias
build.
inflammables.
They employ and
Tenemos
they build
entonces
the type
dentro
of
del
weapons.
histórico cuando
So
el
within the
ejército republicano
history,
irlandés
when the
empezó
Republican Irish Army started
capacitar a
to
grupos no estatales
train
y
non-state
ellos al
groups,
ver que una de las armas que más le hacían
when
contrapeso a la
they saw that
adelante de la
one
fuerza
of the
pública
most
fue empezar a utilizarlas en
strong
campamentos
weapons,
ilegales,
they started to use them in
de
illegal
coca
fields, in
y también vemos
cocaine
en el año
fields.
2002 una
In
incursión de nuevas
2002,
tecnologías, para decirlo así,
also they started
empezaron
using
a
new
hacer
technologies.
un poco más
They
detallada la
started to
construcción de estas
do
minas.
the
Bien,
construction of
ustedes
these
están
mines was
viendo
more
allí un
detailed.
análisis de diferentes
Here you
circuitos
can
que se
see an
han
analysis of
o
different
que son
circuits
empleados en las minas
that were
antipersonales.
used in the
Tal
anti-personal
así que en el
mines.
2008 y 2009 hubo un
In
incremento
2008 and in
importantísimo
2009, there was
en
this
minas
really big
antipersonales y
increase
estas con bajo
of
contenido de metal.
anti-personal mines with
Estamos
low
entendiendo
content of metal.
que estas minas como tal
So these mines
eran
as
una
such
proliferación que utilizaban los grupos,
were
pero
proliferated,
vamos a encontrar
and
una
they were
serie de
being used by the
similitudes.
groups,
Si
but we're
ustedes
going to
encuentran
find some similarities.
en esta
You can
imagen,
see in this
encontramos la
image,
mina M14 de
we can
fabricación norteamericana
find
y
the
vamos a
mine
encontrar unas minas que se
M14,
encuentran
which
sobre el
was
territorio
made by
nacional, que
the
son de
US, and
fabricación
also there's
improvisadas
other
o caseras.
mines
Y
which
son a
were
partir de estas minas que
ma-
uno empieza
made by hand. improvised. And so once we can compare now, we have to the left an improvised mine, and we have to the right, to the contrary, we have the industrial to the left and the handmade one improvised to the right. So we're going to find big similarities within the ones that are improvised, which are very similar to the industrial ones. In this video, we're going to understand a bit about these. These are renders that were made for some studies in order to prove the durability of these mines, and we can find the similarities. We see that they are very similar than the ones that were industrially made, which is another type of mines, and their source, their energy source is not mechanical. These are electrical. We're going to take the case of Glass Mine 43, which was totally made by glass, and we're going to find in our national territory, this in the Department of Antioquia, in the Andine region, and there's a big similarity with these improvised mines. They have big similarities by with the other mines that we used in the Second World War. This is a chemical process, sulfuric acid, H2CO4, and so that we can start the train of fire. This is what was used with gunpowder. So the problematic of mines at a world level, on the national territory, there's a big similarity among them because of the historical level and the evolution of the artifacts that are being used as illicit means for war. But what is the analysis that the Colombian state does? It is a problem because the improvised mines are a problem. They are still mines. In the slides, if you can see the different shapes, these mines, even if they are being made by hand, you can see here in the next slides that this is not common, but the armed groups, in order to take care of their illegal economies, they are using this type of artifacts. Do you remember the Thunder mine that we were talking about? So in this case, you're going to find a metallic container, which is a cylinder, and it is being tied up to a coke plant. So when the plant is retrieved, which was the same as when in China, whenever the Mongols removed the flags, in our national territory, we can find this. And so these are the real figures of the renders that we saw with regards to this problem. We have other mines also that we can find with other characteristics, and they have similar characteristics as the industrially made ones. The ones that we're looking at in this slide are the mines that are in the southeastern part of the country. They have different switches that can be activated, but they are being placed in areas where it's being presumed that people can get to. So in the national territory, we're not going to find, for example, a pattern installation as the Varsovia Pact or other pact in accordance with the objective or the path. Here, there's no a pattern of installation as such. That is why in Colombia we have mined areas. Here, this is an ammunition that had been modified. For the Colombian context, we have to be clear. This ammunition was supposed to be thrown by hand, but it was adapted that by contact it could explode. So it becomes an anti-personnel mine. So we have two types of switch by mechanically by tension, and the other one is electrical to the left. But the initial purpose is that if this ammunition has been modified in the context of a general operation, it would be a grenade, but now it is an anti-personal mine because it doesn't discriminate. And we have situations within our conflict that we have here in our national territory. So now we're going to move to this spreading of installation and fabrication of anti-personal mines in the territory. And what do we have here in the Colombian state to respond to this threat? We have two responses. One is the humanitarian demining, which is under the responsibility of the peace counselorship. And so at the beginning of the year, our colleague Lina also said, expressed all the support that we've received from the OAS to move forward with these tasks in a humanitarian environment, to move forward with these tasks, to be able to take care of the humanity and dignity of all of the communities in general in the national territory. Then to the left, we have the response where we cannot do the demining. We have to do demining in the development of operations that the public forces are doing, be it by the national police, the national army, the national. So the difference with one and the other one, of course, it is within the humanitarian aspect, but this demining during the development of operations takes care in a timely manner of these explosives in the national territory. The demining in the development of operations is done by specialized teams of our public forces, OLEX, GAUR, MATE, while the humanitarian demining is being done by Colombia by 7 organizations who are duly accredited for humanitarian demining. In the development of operations, it's being done by the different operations that are being done by the public forces of Colombia. And they can also be done per a request in coordination with the group. It is a very punctual, specific procedure, but humanitarian demining is looking at analysis of effects and prioritization, also technical studies, non-technical studies, clearance, and also there's a quality assurance, which is the OAS, to deliver the use of the land in the communities. So who are intervening in the humanitarian demining in Colombia, the national authorities, and whoever works in it. So the external component who helps us to verify that the tasks have been complied in compliance with the national norms in accordance with IGMA. So 2 are subsidiary and 2 from the state. So there's a learning curve because we have to take care of the needs of the communities for the dangers that are being derived in the territory. So thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate also the IADB for giving us this very fast opportunity to explain, but we can explain the situation of anti-personal mines at a national level. Thank you so much. In the name of the IADB, we thank Mr. Manuel Alejandro Cardona Lopez for his very inspiring intervention and for sharing his vast experience and personal commitment with demining and humanitarian protection. Now we're coming to our last presentation, which is dedicated to the evolution of the group of international monitors, GMI, and GATI group, as well as the potential and capabilities to keep contributing to humanitarian demining in the region. Our first presenter is Colonel of Engineering Luis Augusto Alves Leal Ferreira from the Brazilian Army. He is chief of the GMI in Colombia, with more than 30 years of service in the Army of Brazil, the OAS, and the United Nations. He has occupied functions of command in units of engineering and international operations of demining. He also was a supervisor and instructor in the Marminca operations in Nicaragua and Honduras. In his current role, leading the activities of GMI in Colombia. He is a presenter Lieutenant Colonel of Engineering, Fabiano Marquez Falcao. We have the other presenter from the Brazilian Army. He is a chief of the GATI in Colombia, has a solid training in the military and wide experience in planning and execution of operations of humanitarian demining. He has coordinated missions in Brazil, and since December of 2004, he is directing the GATI also since December 2024, and also the strengthening of capabilities. So gladly, I will give the floor to Colonel of Engineering Luis Augusto Alves Leal Ferreira and Lieutenant Colonel of Engineering Fabiano Marquez Falcao, who will be presenting their joint vision on the activities of the GMI and the progresses of GATI in the framework of humanitarian demining in Colombia.
Muy buenas tardes, soy Coronel Leal.
Good afternoon. I am the Leal Colonel from the Army of Brazil, from the group of Inter-American Monitors in Colombia.
Acerca del histórico, potenciales y capacidades del grupo de monitores
interamericanos
y del grupo de asesores técnicos interamericanos.
The history, the capabilities of the group of Inter-American Monitors and of the group of advisors, technical advisors, Inter-American, who are supporting all of the program of humanitarian demining in Colombia. It is a great honor for us. Me and Lieutenant Colonel Falcao, we're going to begin our presentation now. Our seminar, it's a great honor to be invited to do this presentation about the history of the use of anti-personnel mines in the hemisphere. So we're going to start with our presentation of the GMI, its potential, its evolution and capabilities. We are going to follow this agenda, the backgrounds, the aspects of the GMI, aspects of GATI, which is going to be presented by General Falcao, Lieutenant Falcao, and the conclusions. Then we're going to begin with the background. Colombia signs the convention, the Ottawa Convention, on the 3rd of December of 1997. This enters, it's active in Colombia on the 1st of March of 2001. As 31 out of 32 departments were affected. The only one that was not affected was the Department of San Andres, which are islands in the Caribbean. So the entire continental territory of Colombia was affected. In March of 2003, the OAS and the state of Colombia, of the government of Colombia, signs an agreement of cooperation to strengthen the national plan of action against anti-personnel mines, ICMA, Colombia. The DH, the Humanitarian Demining in Colombia, has its origins in October of 2005 when 3 Inter-American Monitors of Marminas, which is the mission for removal of mines in South America, which was the mission of the IADB back then. And they were working in Peru and Ecuador, so these monitors received the task of providing instructions of humanitarian demining to a group of 40 Colombian military, and they formed the first platoon of humanitarian demining in Colombia, and they were certified on October 21st of 2005. So those 3 Inter-American Monitors from Marminas, they were supporting there in Colombia. So we have their names here. 2 of the Honduran Army and 1 from the Nicaraguan Army. They made a link with aspects that have already been discussed here in the seminar by other people, other presenters, and other authorities. So back then,
la misión para asistencia a remoción de minas en
The mission
Centroamérica,
for
en los países de
removal of
Honduras,
mines in
Nicaragua,
Central America had already
Guatemala y
ended
Costa
in
Rica.
Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala,
Entonces,
and
esos
Costa
ejércitos
Rica.
tenían gran expertise
So
y
those
gran
armies had a
conocimiento acerca
great
del trabajo de
expertise, they had
desminado.
great knowledge about the work of humanitarian demining.
Además de esos tres monitores, fueron
So
certificados
besides
6
these
miembros de
3
la vicepresidencia
monitors,
aquí en
6
Colombia y
members
fue hecho el proceso de
of the
aseguramiento de
vice
calidad interna
presidency were
en un campo
certified in
minado,
Colombia,
La
and
Monal,
also
cerca
the
Cartagena,
process of
también en el
internal
año de
quality
2005.
control was done in the field
El
of Mamonal,
2006
close to
fue
Cartagena,
creado
in the year
oficialmente el 1 de
2005.
marzo
Then
el
in
GMI Colombia,
2006,
siendo
officially the
designado como su
first
primer jefe un
the
teniente coronel
GMI Colombia
brasileño
was
y dos
created,
capitanes
and
brasileños,
the chief
así
was
como
Lieutenant Colonel from
dos
Brazil
otros
and 2
capitanes
other
del
Brazilian
ejército de Honduras.
captains
Ahí está
and
entonces
2
la
other
primera,
captains of the Army
el
of
primer
Honduras.
equipo de
So
personal
here we
del
have the
GMI
first
oficialmente
team
creado fue este con
of
5
staff
miembros.
of the GMI, which was officially created, which
Ya en
was
el
this with 5
2006,
members.
el GMI realizó muchísimas actividades
Then
de
in
apoyo al
2006,
DH
the
acá en
GMI
Colombia,
did
donde se
many
destacan
activities of
algunos.
support
El
to
primer
the
curso de
DH here in
emergencias
Colombia
médicas,
in humanitarian
capacitando
demining.
líderes,
So we have
desminadores
the
y
first course
supervisores
of medical
nacionales
emergencies,
en ese
training
tipo de
leaders,
actividad,
deminers, and
y
national
el monitoreo de
supervisors
operaciones de
in this
desminado
type
en
of
dos
activities,
campos
and the
minados,
monitoring
La
of
Pita y El
operations of
Bagre,
demining
en
in
dos
2
distintos
minefields,
departamentos
La Pita and
de
El Bagre,
Colombia,
in 2
y en ese
different
mismo año fue
departments
finalizado
of
el proceso de
Colombia.
despeje en esos dos
And in
campos
that same
minados.
year, the process of
La
clearance was
misión de
finished in those
GMI
2
es esa,
mine
firmada el
fields.
2003
The mission of the
y
GMI was
confirmado
it
hasta
was
el
signed in
hasta la
2003,
presente fecha, pero con una nueva firma
and
el
it was
2015.
confirmed as
En un
of
rato
the present
verificaremos
date,
por qué
and it was signed
esa
again in
confirmación tuvo que ser
2015.
hecha
We're
en
going to verify
2015.
why this confirmation had to
Responsabilidades
be
de la
done in
red por
2015.
intermedio del GMI es
The
la
responsibilities
asesoría
of the
técnica
IADB
al
through
programa
the
AICMA
GMI
Colombia
is the
y
technical
el
advising
apoyo a
to
la
the
AICMA de
program
la
AICMA
OEA
Colombia
en las
and the
tareas de
support to
acreditación
the
y
AICMA of the
monitoreo.
OAS
Muy
in the
importante que el
tasks of
GMI
crediting and
siempre ha actuado
monitoring.
como un facilitador
It
del
is very important that the
enlace
GMI
entre
has
las
always
fuerzas
acted as a
militares de
facilitator and a
Colombia
link
y todos los
between the
civiles que
military forces
trabajan
of Colombia and the
en el
OAS
programa de
and all
desminado
of the
humanitario, sean
civilians that are
colombianos o no.
working in the
Es
program
algo
of
muy
humanitarian
sencillo de
demining, be
comprender.
them Colombian or
Militares
not.
tenemos
This is
nuestros,
something very simple to understand.
hablamos el mismo idioma, por
We
así
have
decir,
in the
entonces es
military,
fácil para nosotros, tenemos este contacto
we talk
con
the
el
same
ejército de
language, let's
Colombia y con
say,
las
so it's
fuerzas
easy for us
de
to
la
have
Marina de
this
Colombia,
contact
los
with the Army
infantes
of
marina que
Colombia and
también
with the
hace
armed
ese
forces
trabajo.
of the Marine of Colombia, the
Esa es
infantry,
la
who are
evolución
also doing this work.
del GMI, creado el 2006
created in
y hasta el
2006 and up
2008,
to
trabajando
2008,
con capacitación de
working
tropas para
with
el
the
DH.
training of troops for the
También
DH.
desde el
And
2008 al
since
2015,
2008 to
principalmente el
2015,
trabajo de monitoreo.
mainly
Y en
monitoring.
2015
And in
fue creado el
2015,
GATI
the GATU was
con
created
tareas
with
específicas,
specific
quedándose
tasks.
con el GMI las
And
tareas de
the
monitoreo,
GMI had the
acreditación
monitoring,
y asesoría
accreditation,
técnica.
and technical
Hoy día,
advisory
los
tasks.
países
Today,
contribuyentes
the contributing
que
countries
aportan personal
that
especializado
contribute with
son Brasil y
specialized
México.
staff
Esos dos
are Brazil
países
and
que aportan
Mexico.
personal
These
al
are the two
GMI.
countries that provide staff to the GMI.
Este es el número de monitores
This is the number
interamericanos que
of
han
inter-American monitors
trabajado acá en
that have
GMI
worked here
desde
in
el
GMI since
2006 hasta el
2006 to
2025.
2025.
59
59
brasileños, 7
Brazilians,
hondureños,
7
5
Hondurans,
mexicanos,
5
1
Mexicans,
argentino, 1
1
nicaragüense
Argentinian,
y
1
un
Nicaraguan,
militar
and
de
1
Trinidad y
military from
Tobago,
Trinidad and
formando el
Tobago,
total de
with a total of
74 monitores
74
interamericanos.
inter-American monitors.
Esa es la conformación del
This is the
ICMA de la
setup
OEA
of the ICMA of the OAS here
acá en Colombia.
in Colombia.
Es un grupo
It is
que
a group
tiene diversas y distintas
from
tareas.
diverse that carry out
GMI como
diverse
parte de la RIT
tasks, and the
trabaja
GMI as part of
bajo
the
supervisión y
IADB
mando
works
del jefe de
under
la misión de la
the
OEA
head
acá
of the
en
mission of the
Colombia
OAS here in
y
Colombia.
está
And
al lado de la
it
unidad
is
de
next to
operaciones
the
integrales y
integral
administrativas de la misión.
operations and the administrative
Trabajamos
operations of
entonces
the
en
mission.
apoyo
So we work in support
a las tareas de
mainly to the
acreditación y
accreditation and
monitoreo, y también
monitoring
hacemos la
tasks, and
asistencia técnica
also
a todo el programa
technical
cuando
assistance
somos
to the whole program
solicitados para ese
when
tipo de
they
actividad.
request this activity.
Aquí a la
Here,
izquierda de
to the
ustedes se
left,
verifica cuál es la
we
estructura del DH en
verify
Colombia,
the structure of the DH in
aporte de
Colombia,
personal
the
y
contribution of staff
estructuras del
and
gobierno de
structures
Colombia,
of
que
the
está a
government
la
of
cabeza de
Colombia
todo
that
el
is at the
programa,
head of the whole
los países
program,
donantes que
the
hacen
donor
el
countries
aporte
that provide
financiero
the financial
al
contribution to
programa,
the program,
países
the
contribuyentes que aportan
contributing
personal
countries that
especializado
contribute with
y
specialized staff,
organismos
and
internacionales, en el
international
caso, la
organizations,
OEA y la
in
HIT.
this case the
La
OAS and the
ejecución del trabajo se
IADB. The
queda a cargo de
execution of the
organizaciones de
work is
desminados
in
humanitarios,
charge of
tanto
the
militares
organizations of
cuanto civiles. Ahí
demining, both
tenemos la
civilian and
Brigada de
military. We
Desminado
have the
Humanitario del
brigade of
Ejército,
the
el
army
Batallón de Desminado
uh,
Humanitario de Infantería
humanitarian
Marina de la Armada de Colombia
demining, and
y
the
diversas
uh,
estructuras que son
the
organismos
Marines of Colombia,
civiles que también
different
trabajan en el
organizations
DH
that are
acá,
civilian that
como el
work in the
Hello
DH
Trust,
here, like the Hello
Humanicemos,
Crest,
Campaña
Humanicemos,
Colombiana contra Minas,
the
entre otros
campaign
que
of
hacen
Colombia
ese tipo
Against
de
Mines
trabajo.
that do this type
Todos
of work.
son
All of them
ODH, como
are
llamamos, Organizaciones de
part of
Desminado Humanitario, y
the
hacen su
ODH
trabajo al
and
paralelo,
do
o
their
sea,
work
en áreas
parallelly
distintas, cada
in
una
different areas,
asignada
each
por
that
el
have
gobierno
been
de Colombia
designated by the government of
por
Colombia,
sus estructuras
and
que
due to
hacen
their
este control
structures
y la
that
designación.
do this control and
Las
the
actividades
designation.
bajo el mando
The activities under the command
Tratado de Ottawa
of the
son los
Ottawa
5 ejes de
Agreement are
desminado
the 5
humanitario
axes
que
of
performan la
humanitarian
acción
demining
integral contra
that,
minas,
uh,
educación sobre el riesgo de
like
minas,
education on
destrucción de
mines,
minas
destruction
almacenadas,
of
promoción de la
mines
Convención de Ottawa,
stored,
del
the
Tratado de Ottawa,
promotion of the
asistencia a las
Ottawa
víctimas
Agreement,
y el desminado
assistance to
humanitario.
victims, and humanitarian
El
demining.
trabajo del
The
GMI
work of the
está
GMI
enfoque
is focused
precisamente en el
precisely
desminado humanitario.
on humanitarian demining.
Ya terminando mi presentación,
Finishing my presentation,
actualmente
right
lo que
now,
GMI hace
what
es
the
apoyar
GMI
a
does
la
is to
ICMA de la
support
OEA
the
en el
EICMAN of
trabajo
the
de gestión de
OAS
calidad
in
de DH en
the
Colombia,
management of
actuando como
quality control of
componente
the DH,
externo de
acting like
monitoreo.
an
O
external
sea, que
monitoring
existen
component,
monitores
because we
civiles
have
de
civilian
la ICMA
monitors
que
of
hacen
the
ese
EICMA
trabajo
that do
y
this work,
así también
and
los
also
monitores
the
interamericanos, los
inter-American
otros militares
monitors,
del
the
GMI, que
militaries of
apoyamos
the
a la ICMA
GMI that
en ese
support
tipo de
EICMA
trabajo.
in these
Principalmente, como
tasks,
está ahí
mainly
también, trabajos de
as you see
acreditación
in
y
accreditation
monitoreo
works
en
and
todas esas
monitoring,
actividades
in
que
all those
están
activities that
explicitadas
are
ahí en la
explicited
pantalla.
here on the chart.
Evaluación documental,
Evaluation of
evaluación
documents,
operacional, aseguramiento de
operational
calidad de las
evaluation,
operaciones de DH, inspección de terrenos
the
despejados.
inspection of
Tenemos
cleared
entonces la
terrains,
capacidad
etc.
y
And
el
we have the
potencial de
capacity and
hacer
the
todo ese
potential
tipo
of
de
doing all
trabajo
this type of
con la
work
experticia que
with
traemos
the expertise
de
that we
las
have brought
experiencias
from the
anteriores de nuestro ejército,
previous
de
experiences of
nuestras
our
Fuerzas
armies,
Armadas
our
y de
armed
la
forces,
experticia que
and
tenemos hoy
the
día
expertise that
para
we have
apoyar todo
today
ese tipo
to
de
support all
actividades
these
que son
activities
solicitadas por la
that
ICMA
are
de la OEA.
requested by EICMA from the OAS.
Como conclusiones ya,
As
el
a
apoyo del
conclusion,
GMI
the
HIT
support
al
of the
DH
GMI IADB
tiene
to the
como
DH
reflejos
has
estos 5 que
reflections.
son los
These 5
principales. Hay otros
reflections that
temas,
are the main.
estos
We
los
have
que nos
more, but
gustaría
these are the
aportar a
ones that we
ustedes.
would like to
Aporte
share with you.
experiencias en doble
The
vía, o sea,
contribution
que
of
traemos a Colombia experiencias
two-way
de nuestros
experience,
países,
because
así
we
como
bring it to Colombia
llevamos de
experience of
Colombia
other
para nuestros
countries, and we
países
take
también
from Colombia experiences to
conocimientos y
other
experiencias que son importantes para
countries that are
nosotros.
important for
Contribuimos a
us.
la
We
confianza de
contribute to the
donantes, a la
trust
administración
of
eficiente y
donors and the
transparente de
efficient and
recursos,
transparent
todo bajo
resource
los
administration
estándares
under the
internacionales
international standards of
desminado
the
humanitario.
humanitarian demining. We
Facilitamos el
facilitate
control
the
del
control
territorio,
of
o
the
sea,
territory,
trabajo final con la
that
entrega,
is,
que
with the
son
delivery of the
las áreas
territories
de desminado
and
humanitario,
of all the
perdón,
areas
las
that
áreas
demined
despejadas que
or
entregamos
cleared,
a la comunidad y al
that
gobierno.
we give it back
Entonces
to the
facilitamos el
government and the
control del
communities, and we
territorio y el
facilitate the
acceso a
control of
áreas
the
y pueblos
territory
afectados
and access
por
to the
minas
areas
antipersonales.
and towns affected.
Asimismo,
And we
facilitamos
also
la reanudación
facilitate
de actividades
the
económicas
starting of or the renewal of activities, economic activities, and the access to services by the citizens, strengthening the integration and regional cooperation, employing military staff in humanitarian tasks. And we also verify that the actions of the GMI support the four pillars of the OAS, because that is one of great missions to support the pillars of democracy, human rights, security, and development. Some achievements: technical support, verification of the age, strengthening of national capacities. This is verified through the 20 years of GMI working in Colombia. Different and numerous technical reports and accountability, facilitation of international cooperation, contribution to the compliance of the Ottawa Agreement or Treaty, and since 2008 with the contribution of military and civilians. Our mission is to save lives. That is the great target of the GMI through the years. And this is what we will continue doing while the IADB and the OAS request us to do so. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to give the floor to Lieutenant Colonel Falcom, who's going to close this presentation with the ideas and talk about the GATT. Thank you. Good afternoon. I introduce myself. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Gatti, and I work in Colombia right now. And I am in this job since December 2024. So for me, it is an honor and a pleasure to contribute with this event that is so important and so significant for all of us. And a cordial greeting to all those that are listening to us for your attendance, and also for contributing to the topic of humanitarian demining. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what the GATT is. That is the Group of Inter-American Technical Advisors of Colombia. First of all, we will talk about the history of the GATT. Why was it created here in Colombia? In this slide, we have a little bit of the history of the humanitarian demining here in Colombia. Since the Ottawa Agreement in 1997, then we had the creation of the first platoon of humanitarian demining, and Colombia expands its capacity to a company and then the first battalion. And in 2014, in this year, through a decree that is here, Colombia verified the need to expand its capacity for the humanitarian demining task. And why did this happen? Well, because in this year, at this moment, Colombia thought that this structure that we now have in Colombia for the support of the donor countries and contributing countries, that at some moment in time, this support is going to end. And so it would be necessary to expand the state capacity and the structure of the country, because when all this support is reduced, the country would have its own structure already developed and its own capacity. So this was the purpose. And with this, here you have the decree. And
el
it was,
GATT, Grupo de
and
Assessores
this is how
Técnicos
the GATT
Interamericanos,
was created. That is a group of
por medio de
technical
acordo de
inter-American
cooperação e assistência
advisors
técnica
through
entre la
an
RIM
agreement of
y el
technical
Comando
assistance
General
between the
de las Fuerzas
IADB and
Militares
the General Command
Colombianas.
of the
Este
Military
acordo
Forces of
firmado
Colombia.
entonces en
And
7 de
so
enero de
it was
2015,
confirmed on January 7, 2015,
com el objetivo entonces de brindar capacitación
to
del
train
personal militar
the military
en temas de
staff
desminado
on
humanitário,
issues of humanitarian
cumplindo las
demining,
normas
complying with all the standards,
nacionales e internacionales.
both national and international.
Y ahí está el acuerdo.
Here you see the
Entonces,
agreement
brindar então capacitação
to
a
provide
los
training
militares
to the
em
military
temas de desminado humanitário.
on the issue of
Nuestro grupo
humanitarian demining.
entonces,
So our
el
group,
GATT está
the GAT
hoy
team,
com esta composição com dois
it has
militares.
this
Eu sou
composition
líder,
right
tenho
now, two
assessor
military, I'm the
que é
head, and I
capitão de
have
la Armada do
an
Brasil.
advisor that is a captain of the Navy of
E
Brazil.
entonces en la
And
estrutura
in the
organizacional militar
structure
colombiana,
of the
GATT
military of
está
Colombia,
aí
GATI is here,
junto al
together
Comando
or
General
next to the General Command
em la
and
sesión de
the
operaciones.
uh,
Y estamos ahí entonces,
operations.
este es nuestro
And
enlace
this
acá
is
dentro del
our
país, con quien
liaison
coordinamos los
within
trabajos,
whom we coordinate all the work
las demandas, las
and
cuestiones
demands and
administrativas
administrative issues,
para que sea posible entonces
so
brindar
that it is possible to provide
capacitaciones.
the training.
Y dentro de la estructura
And
de la
within
RIM,
the structure of the
entonces,
IDB,
desarrolla
the IDB
entonces
developed
estas líneas de acción,
these
estos ejes
action
de
lines
trabajos,
or
y el
working
GATT
axis,
entonces
and the
está
GATI is
cumplindo então de los ejes
complying
de
with
trabajo
one of
que
the
es el tema de desminado
axis of
humanitario.
work of the IADB, which is the humanitarian
¿Qué
demining.
hecho entonces
And
GATT desde
what has the
2015
GATI
hasta
done
la
since
fecha?
2015 to
Ya
this date?
completamos 10
We have
años
already completed
desde
10
su
years
creación.
from its creation.
Entonces, desde
So
2015,
from
GATT capacitado
2015, GATI has trained
267
267
monitores
monitors,
nacionales en
national
desminado
in
humanitario.
humanitarian
Ahí
demining.
están los números.
Here you have the figures.
En este año ya,
And in this year,
ya hemos capacitado
we have
13
trained
monitores.
13 more monitors.
Tenemos entonces ahí
So we have now
cronograma de curso para
the
este año.
schedule of courses for
Ya,
this
ya
year.
finalizamos 2 cursos y
We
ahí hay
finished 2
tercer
courses,
curso
and there's a third
que
one
está programado
that is
para,
set up
como está ahí,
to
setembro
take place
hasta
in
novembro.
September to November.
E estamos aqui hablando sobre los
Here we're
monitores
talking
nacionales,
about the
que
national
es el
monitors
principal
of the
producto
DH, which is the main
del GATT.
product of the
¿Y qué
GATI.
es el monitor
And
nacional?
what is a national monitor?
Entonces, acá,
Well, here
nesta diapositiva,
in this chart,
dibujo, hay entonces
you see
una estructura jerárquica,
the
donde tenemos
hierarchical
abajo
structure,
que
where
seriam los
at the bottom we
líderes
have all the
em,
leaders
em uma área de operações.
in the operations area.
Em nível mais alto estão os
And at
supervisores,
the higher
que
level,
estão
we have the
encarregados
supervisors that are
entonces
in charge
de
of
fiscalizar, de acompanhar os trabalhos dos
supervising and
monitores.
accompanying all the work of the
Em um nível
monitors.
mais alto
And at the
estariam
higher
os
level, we have the
monitores.
monitors themselves.
Entonces, el
And
monitor
so
seria
the monitor would be
la más alta
the
estrutura
highest structure
dentro del
within
desminado humanitário,
the humanitarian demining,
que es encargados entonces
in charge of
de garantizar la calidad
guaranteeing the
y
quality
la
and
seguridad de los
the
trabajos
security of all the
en
works
una área de
in an
operaciones.
area of operations,
Asegurar que estão
ensure
cumprindo
that they
las
are
reglas
complying with the
nacionales,
national
internacionales
and
y
international
los
rules and
principios
laws and the
del
principles
desminado
of
humanitário.
humanitarian demining.
El monitor
The monitor
debe ser componente
should be
externo,
an
o sea,
external
los
component.
líderes y los
So the leaders and
supervisores
supervisors
hacen parte
are
de las
part
organizaciones de
of
desminado
the
humanitario.
humanitarian
Y el
demining
monitor
organizations, but the
está
monitor is
afuera, hace
outside,
parte de
is
componente
part
externo,
of an external
de tal
component
manera
in
que
such a way
cumpla
that
de
they
los
comply
principios
with
del
one of
desminado
the
humanitario, que
principles
sería
of
la
humanitarian demining, which
neutralidad
is
y la
neutrality
imparcialidad.
and
para que
impartiality,
tenga entonces
so that they can have
de una manera imparcial de garantizar que los
they can
trabajos
guarantee
siguen
in
cumpliendo
an
las
unbiased
normas
way that all the
y
works are being
com los
complied with,
princípios de seguridad.
following the principles of security.
Y con eso,
And
entonces,
with this,
el trabajo del GATT sigue
the GATI
con el
job
principal
continues
objetivo de
with the main
ampliar la
objective of
capacidad
expanding
nacional
national
de Colombia,
capabilities of
porque
Colombia,
estos
because
monitores,
these monitors,
nosotros como representantes del
as
GATT acá en Colombia,
representatives of the GATI here
certificamos,
in
o
Colombia,
sea,
we certify them.
confirmamos que
That is, that
están
we confirm that they
capacitados,
are
están listos para
trained and
cumplir
ready to
sus
comply
labores
with their
acá dentro
tasks
de Colombia
within
como un
Colombia
componente
as
externo,
an external
cumpliendo
component,
entonces los
and
principios
that
de
they
designado
comply with the
humanitario de
principles of humanitarian
neutralidad, de
demining, of
imparcialidad,
neutrality, impartiality,
y de una manera
and in such a way that
que certifique que los trabajos
we
siguen
can certify that
cumpliendo
the
todas las normas
tasks
para cumplir el
continue
objetivo
complying with
final,
all
que
the
es
standards for
liberar las
the
áreas
final
contaminadas.
goal, which is to free all
Con
the
eso,
contaminated
entonces,
areas.
finalizo
With this, I'm
mi
going to end my
presentación
presentation.
y fue para mí un honor
And for me, it was an honor to
contribuir de alguna manera
contribute in
para
some way
este evento
to
tan
this event
importante.
that is
Ahí
so
están
important.
mis contactos,
Here you
estoy
have my contact.
disponible, quedo
I'm
acá siempre
available. I'm
atento
always
para
here
lo que sea
and
necesario. Muchas gracias.
willing to help you in anything that I can.
Agradecemos al coronel de
We thank
Ingeniería
Colonel Luis Augusto Alvarez
y al
Leal
teniente coronel de
Ferreira and
Ingeniería
Lieutenant
Fabiano
Colonel
Márquez Falcao
Marquez
su valiosa exposición
Farcao for
conjunta,
their valuable
que nos
joint
permitió conocer de manera
presentation that
integral
allowed us
el
to
trabajo, los
know
logros
about
y
the
las
work and the
proyecciones del
achievements and
GMI
projections
y
of the
del GATI
GMI and the
en el
GATI
fortalecimiento
in the
de desminado
strengthening
humanitario
of
en la región.
humanitarian demining in the
Damas y
region.
caballeros, hemos
Ladies and
llegado al final de
gentlemen,
este
we
importante
have reached
seminario
the
de
end of
desminado
this
humanitario.
important seminar on the
Para
humanitarian
el cierre
demining.
oficial de este
For the
seminario,
official
tengo el
closing of
honor
this
de ceder
seminar,
la
I have the
palabra
honor
al
of
Mayor General
giving the
Fuerza
floor
Aérea
to
Perú,
To
César Augusto
General
Macedo García,
Major General
presidente del Consejo de
Augusto Garcia,
Delegados de la
President of the
Junta
Council of
Interamericana de
Delegates of the IADB.
Señoras y señores,
Ladies and gentlemen,
al llegar al final de este importante
now
seminario
that we reach the
denominado
end of this
La
important
historia del
seminar
uso de
called
minas
The Story
antipersonal
of the
en el
Use of
hemisferio,
Anti-Personal
deseo expresar
Mines in the
en nombre
Hemisphere, I
de la
want to
Junta
express on
Interamericana de
behalf of the
Defensa
IADB
nuestro profundo
our
agradecimiento
profound
a todos quienes han
appreciation
contribuido
to all
a su
those that
éxito.
contributed to its success.
Durante esta jornada
During this
hemos
day,
recorrido un
we
valioso
have
trayecto
gone
histórico
through the
desde las
history
misiones
from
de
the
Marminca,
missions of
misión de
Marminca, the
asistencia en
mission of
remoción de
the
minas en
assistance in the
América
removal
Central,
of mines in Central
y
America,
Marminas,
and
misión de
Marminas, the
asistencia
mission
en
of
remoción de
assistance
minas
in
en
the
América del
removal
Sur,
of mines in South
que
America,
sentaron las bases
that
de la doctrina
laid down
del
the
deminado
foundations for the
humanitario en nuestra
doctrine of
región,
humanitarian
hasta
demining
la
in our
situación
region
actual
up to the
en
current
países
situation in
como
countries
Colombia,
like
Chile,
Colombia,
Ecuador
Chile,
y Perú.
Ecuador, and Peru.
Hemos escuchado sobre
We
la
have
trayectoria
heard
del
about
programa
the
AICMA,
program
Acción Integral
Integral
contra
Action
Minas
against
Antipersonales de la
anti-personal
OEA,
mines of
y
the
sobre las
OAS,
capacidades
and
técnicas
about the
humanas
technical
del
and
Grupo de
human
Monitores
capacities of the Group of
Interamericanos,
Monitors, of
GMI,
Inter-American Monitors,
y del Grupo de
GMI,
Asesores
and the
Técnicos
Group of Technical
Interamericanos, GATI,
Inter-American Advisors, GATI,
cuyo trabajo diario
whose
refleja el
daily work
compromiso
reflects the
permanente de la JUC
permanent commitment
con
of
la
the
seguridad
IADB
y el
with
bienestar
the
de nuestras
security and
regiones.
well-being of our nations.
Este esfuerzo conjunto
This joint
entre la OEA
effort
y la
between the
JIP
OAS and
está en
the
plena consonancia con los objetivos de
GMI
la Convención
is
de
in
Ottawa,
accordance with the Ottawa
que nos
Agreement
orienta a la
that
eliminación
orients us
total
to
de las
the
minas
total
antipersonal,
elimination
de la
of
asistencia
anti-personal
integral a
mines
las
and to
víctimas.
the holistic assistance
Cada
of
paso que damos en ese
victims. Every
sentido
step that we take in
representa
this
una
sense
victoria para la
represents
paz,
a victory
la
for
estabilidad
peace,
y la dignidad
stability,
humana
and
en el
human
hemisferio.
dignity in the hemisphere.
Quiero agradecer
I want
especialmente a
to
nuestros distinguidos
especially thank
ponentes
our
por compartir su
appreciated
conocimiento y experiencia,
speakers for
y a
sharing
todos los
their experience
participantes
and
por su
knowledge, and to all
atención
the
y su
participants for their
compromiso con
attention
esta
and
causa.
commitment with this cause.
También expreso nuestra
I also
gratitud
want
a
to
las
express my
instituciones
gratitude
que
to the
hicieron posible este
institutions that
encuentro,
made possible this encounter,
demostrando una vez más que la
demonstrating once more
cooperación
that
multilateral es el
multilateral
camino más
cooperation
seguro
is the
para alcanzar
safest
nuestras
road
metas comunes.
to reach our common goals.
La Junta Interamericana de
The
Defensa,
Inter-American
desde el
Defense
siglo
Board
pasado,
since last
ha estado
century
a la
has
vanguardia en
been
la
at the
construcción
vanguard
de
in
la
the
doctrina
construction
de
of
desminado
the
humanitario.
doctrine of the humanitarian
Esta
demining.
trayectoria nos
This
inspira y nos
trajectory inspires
compromete
us and
a seguir
commits us
trabajando
to continue
con la misma
working
dedicación
with the same
hasta que
dedication
ningún niño,
until
mujer
no
o adulto
child,
en
woman,
nuestro
or
hemisferio
adult in our
tenga que
hemisphere
temer por
has
la
to
presencia
fear
de una
the
mina
presence
en su
of
camino.
a mine on their
Señoras y
way.
señores,
Ladies and
que el
gentlemen,
espíritu de
that
cooperación
the spirit
y
of
de
cooperation
determinación
and
que hemos
determination
compartido
that
hoy
we have shared today
nos acompañe en nuestra labor
accompany
futura.
us in our future tasks.
Sigamos avanzando
Let's continue
hacia un
advancing towards
continente
a
libre de
continent
minas
free of
antipersonales. Muchas gracias.
anti-personnel mines. Thank you very much.
Agradecemos al Mayor General
We thank
César Augusto Marcedo
Major
García
General
por
Marcelo
honrarnos con su
Garcia for
presencia
honoring
y
us
por
with
brindar las
his
palabras de
presence
clausura de
and
este
the
seminario,
closing remarks of this seminar,
resaltando el compromiso de la CID
highlighting the
con un
commitment of the
hemisferio libre de
IADB
minas
with a
antipersonales.
hemisphere free of
En nombre
anti-personnel
de la
mines.
Junta
On behalf of
Interamericana de
the
Defensa,
IADB,
deseo expresar mi
I
sincero
want to express my
agradecimiento a
sincere
todos los
thanks to
ponentes
all
por
the
sus valiosas
speakers for their
intervenciones,
valuable
así
interventions,
como a los
as
participantes
well
por
as
su
to the
atención e interés
participants
en
for
este
their
importante
attention and
tema.
interest in this important topic.
Este evento ha sido una
This event has
oportunidad
been an
para intercambiar
opportunity to
experiencias y
exchange
fortalecer la
experiences and
cooperación
strengthen
hemisférica en la
hemispheric
erradicación de las
cooperation
minas
in the
antipersonal,
eradication of
reafirmando nuestro compromiso
anti-personnel
común
mines,
con la
reaffirming
seguridad
our
y la paz.
common commitment with security and peace.
Invitamos a todos a
We invite
participar
you
en
all
nuestro
to
próximo
participate
evento,
in our next
nuestro
event,
tercer seminario
our
de
third
protección al medio
seminar on the
ambiente,
protection
que se
of the
llevará a
environment
cabo
that
el
is going
17 de
to take place
septiembre
on
de
September
9 a 14
17
horas
from
y
9
será
to
transmitido
14
por
hours
nuestro canal de YouTube.
through our YouTube channel.
Asimismo, les
And
extendemos una cordial
we
invitación a
invite
seguir
you
las
also to
actividades de la
continue
Junta
with the
Interamericana de
activities
Defensa
of the
a través de
IADB
nuestras cuentas
through our
oficiales en
official
Instagram,
accounts in
X y nuestro
Instagram,
canal de YouTube,
X, and
donde encontrarán
YouTube, where you
información,
will find
noticias
information,
y
news,
registros de
and
nuestras iniciativas
registries
a
of our
favor de la seguridad y
initiatives
la
in
cooperación
favor
hemisférica.
of
Gracias a
security and
todos y que
hemispheric
tengan una buena
cooperation.
tarde.
Thank you and have a good afternoon.